As our region continues to grow, so does the need for innovative solutions, solutions that require collaboration, creativity, and comprehensive understanding of the challenges facing developers, lenders, policymakers, and families. This conference is designed to spark those conversations. Throughout the day, we'll explore financing tools, development strategies, statewide initiatives, and emerging opportunities that can help us build a stronger housing ecosystem. By learning from experts across sectors and hearing real-world case studies from communities similar to our own, we aim to equip attendees with practical insights and renewed momentum for the work ahead. Again, thank you for joining us, for your dedication to our region's future, and for being part of the collective effort to ensure Watertown and all of South Dakota continues to be the place where people can live, work, and thrive. I would also like to thank our sponsors, the Watertown Area Homebuilders Association and Mother of God Monastery. All right, to officially kick off today's conference, please join me in welcoming the Mayor of Watertown, Mayor Ried Holien.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. So thanks for coming out today, this morning. Things like this get me excited because I want to thank all of you for being here, because to some extent, all of you, whatever sphere you're coming from, wherever you see Watertown going, you care about the future of Watertown. And I want to thank you for that, because that's the most important thing. We need everybody on hand, because a rising tide will lift all boats. Because we care about the future of Watertown. We want a vibrant economy. We want good infrastructure. We want a safe community. By the way, if you want a safe community, you can go over and donate blood with either the police department or the fire department today, but that's up to you when it's done. But these are all things that provide a good community. Quality of life issues, good economy, good jobs, but most important in all of that, most important for the future of Watertown is housing. We need places for people to live. We need places for employees to come into Watertown, and we need a good quality of life, and the good quality of life, most important aspect is where you're living. Do you like where you're living? That's the community that you're at, but also the house that you're living in. So I want to challenge everyone here today. In order to grow, in order to get better, in order to satisfy the things that we're all concerned about, we need to get better at housing. But I'm not going to give you some nebulous goal of we need more, we need better. I'm going to specifically say we need to double our growth rate. We're at about 1.5% now, we need 3%. We need to collectively set our goal at a population of 30,000 by 2035. And that will provide us with the people that we need to fill the jobs that we have empty right now. Because if you're a business owner here, you're looking at this and you're thinking, if I need to grow, if I'm going to grow, I can't grow just poaching employees from one business to go to mine and then they switch from mine to another company in another year. That's not sustainable. That's not where you grow. But if you do want that employee to stay with you, get them a good house. Get them so that they have a spouse, kids, nice life. If you care about people, I see a lot of people here from organizations that care about people at a time when they need help, whether that's they have issues or if they're just at a certain demographic of age. If you care about them, you also care about the community. And in order to provide for these quality of life issues, safety, infrastructure, fun things, we need that housing, we need that growth as well. So it impacts everybody. So we need things to change in Watertown in order to get that. We need innovative thinking. We need things like today. So I want to thank everyone who helped put this on, who helped organize it. We need more of this. We need to invest in our community. From the city, we've done good things with childcare and quality of life issues like ice arenas, but we can't do it without all of us working together. So most importantly, in order to reach that goal, we need all of you. So I'm going to challenge you, make connections today. Talk with people. Get something out of this, but don't just leave here today thinking it was a good seminar. Leave here today invigorated about doing something for the future of Watertown. Because essentially that's why we're all here, is because we want a good future for Watertown. So let that start today. Learn something, apply it, and let's all work together for the future of Watertown. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for those words, Mayor. All right. Okay, our first session is the Creative Financing Panel. We're joined by three outstanding leaders who bring vast experience in housing development and financing. First, we have Amy Eldridge. She is with SD Housing, the Director of Rental Housing Development for South Dakota Housing. Born and raised in Scotland, South Dakota, Amy graduated from SDSU before spending 18 years in consumer and ag lending. She joined South Dakota Housing in 2019, initially managing the Housing Opportunity Fund before becoming Director of Rental Housing Development. She brings deep expertise in expanding rental housing opportunities statewide. Next up, we have Lori Moen from Grow South Dakota. She's the Chief Operating Officer for Grow South Dakota more than 30 years. Lori has played a pivotal role in growing affordable housing programs across the state and beyond. She has directed over $34 million in down payment assistance programs supporting more than 1,900 households in South Dakota and $5 million nationally. She also oversees a residential real estate loan portfolio exceeding $18 million. We're honored to have you with us, Lori. And last but not least, we've got Michael Matlin with the USDA, bringing his expertise in federal housing initiatives, funding opportunities, and development incentives that support rural communities across the state. If I could have all three of you join me on stage, please. Each of our panelists today has programming as it relates to housing. Amy at SD Housing will start with an overview of the programs they offer, followed by Lori and Michael.
Good morning. Amy Eldridge, South Dakota Housing. I'm just going to jump right into it because it sounds like we have a lot to cover, and I'm going to probably zip through this quite quickly with a lot of information. Come find me afterwards if you have additional questions, but I'm going to go through a little bit about who we are and then the programs that we have to offer to help with financing various types of housing projects. So South Dakota Housing is a nonprofit public corporation created by the legislature back in 1973. We were created to give the state of South Dakota the opportunity to apply for and utilize funding for the development of housing. And our mission is to assist with the development of decent, safe, and affordable housing opportunities for South Dakotans by utilizing federal, state, and South Dakota housing resources to provide financing programs. The Governor's House program, I'll give a brief overview of it if anybody's not familiar with. It was started in 1996 by Governor Janklow as a rural elderly housing initiative. And it was very quickly changed in 1997 and expanded to include all South Dakotans with income limitations. So typically we build 100 to 150 homes per year, and the current lead time is 12 to 18 months from the time you order your home until delivery. And we require a $1,000 deposit for any developers that are wanting to develop the Governor's House. 2025 pricing, we will be changing these here shortly to reflect inflation. But 2025 pricing for a 2-bedroom was $86,000. That's the delivered price. A 3-bedroom was $96,000. And then the income limits for 2025, if you were a family of 2 or less, the family could not make more than $71,540. And if you are a family of 3 or more, your income must be below $81,760. And then there are further net worth limitations. This is a picture of a typical governor's house with a garage added onto it. And I'm sure many of you have seen these around the countryside. The next program I'll talk about is the home program. This is a federal program through HUD. Annually, we get about $3 million for this program. And we also get another $3 million plus in program income, which is loan funds that are paid back to us on an annual basis. This is a competitive application cycle that occurs once a year. Applications are due the end of August. If you're interested in applying for these funds, you can reach out to us early and we can assist you with helping with your application and questions that you might have. The funding is available for homeownership and rental properties. You can do new construction, acquisition, and rehabilitation with this type of funding. And it's also, we have funding available for security deposit assistance and some homeowner rehab, and that comes on a first come, first served basis. So if you have interest in that, you can reach out to us and we'll help you with those applications. So the home program, you can get 0% loans, 20-year affordability period, which means the units are income restricted. So for 20 years, you have to agree that you'll keep those units income qualified, and we'll have a compliance department that'll work with you on an annual basis to review your tenant data and make sure that those tenants are still income qualifying throughout your 20-year affordability period. There is a match requirement of 12.5%, and the target population is 60% AMI for rental housing. And so if you're in Coddington County, a family of 4 at 60% AMI is $56,000 for that family's income. And if you're doing home ownership, it's 80% AMI. So again, for Coddington County, that would be a family of 4 making less than $75,000. I think we can all agree it's pretty difficult for someone to buy a home if their annual income is $75,000. But there are programs available. Another program that we have, which is a national program, is the National Housing Trust Fund. This is administered by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And South Dakota, again, receives about $3 million a year in this program. Provides housing for extremely low individuals. So 30% AMI. Coddington County would be a family of less than $28,000 a year. It's a competitive application cycle along with the home program. And 0% loans can also be forgivable loans. And a lot of times this works really well with the home program, so you can combine the funding sources and stack it so that you can have mixed income properties. So not everybody's at 30%, not everybody's at 60%. This is only available for rental housing, new construction, acquisition and rehabilitation, relocation services. There's a 30-year affordability period with this one, so you have to ensure that this property stays affordable for 30 years. And every year we set aside $600,000 for special needs housing. Then we have the Housing Tax Credit Program, which is administered by the IRS. Tax incentive for developers to develop low to moderately low income rental units. South Dakota receives around $3.4 million a year, so we can see a common theme. We get about $3 million a year in all of our programs. 10% of the funds are set aside for nonprofits, and 20% are set aside for tribal projects. Developers receive tax credits, and then they sell the credit to an investor, and they utilize that cash equity to finance the project. The property does have deed restrictions on it, but we do not file a mortgage. Again, very competitive process. Typically, developers apply for housing tax credits with home funds and housing trust funds. And those applications are all due at the same time, which is the end of August. And typically it takes us, a couple months to go through the applications, underwrite them, and we give our results for our competitive process at our December board meeting. The tax credits can also be used for new construction, acquisition, and rehabilitation. You can also do it for scattered site projects. So if you have multiple let's say you have multiple apartment complexes located across your community that are owned by the same owner and you want to do rehab on all 3 of them, you could apply for these funds and do them all at the same time. There's a 30-year compliance period. South Dakota Housing staff completes annual reviews, again, of the property. We look at the property conditions as well as the tenant data. And these are rent and income restricted also, and there's multiple layers of the restrictions, whether you're 50% AMI, some have to be 60% AMI, but when it gets into this, you can reach out to our tax credit officer and he can help you work through that stuff. I'm going to just give you a couple examples of some projects that we've done. This is 41 flats located in Sioux Falls. This project used all 3 of those funding sources, home, trust funds, and tax credits, and it was new construction of a 3-story, 41-unit apartment complex. All of the units in this complex were tax credit units, so they were all low income with rent and income limits at 60% AMI and below. And then some of those units, worked with the home program and the trust funds. They had common amenities, your community room, kitchen, with a kitchen and a bathroom, playground, sports complex. The developer on this one was ICAP, and the consultant was Lloyd's out of Sioux Falls. Total project cost was around $9.1 million, and you can see their funding sources. They had quite a stack, so they had tax credit equity of just under $5 million. They got a conventional loan for $1.8 million. Then they got home funds of $1 million, trust funds of $600,000, and then the city of Sioux Falls did an additional loan of $750,000. So sometimes to put these projects together, you're going to have multiple sources of funding like this layered together. And this is the pictures of what this project looked like. So for a low-income property, it's a very nice property. I think everybody can agree that we would all be happy to have our family members living here. We have the Housing Opportunity Fund. This is a state program that's funded through the state of South Dakota and South Dakota Housing together. We have an open application cycle, so it's on a first come, first served basis. We typically open the application cycle mid-April to beginning of May, once we have the once the legislature passes their final budget. So this program requires a 1-to-1 match, and you can use it for new construction, rehabilitation, acquisition. Works really well in our rural communities. You can finance up to 50% of your total project costs. There is always an application maximum, and typically that runs between $300,000 and $400,000. You have to serve families that are at 115% AMI or below. And so this is geared more towards your workforce housing. The affordability period for this program is 5 to 20 years, and that just depends on how you intend to use the funds. So anybody can really apply for these funds if you're a nonprofit or for-profit entity, tribal governments, housing authorities. It's really open to anybody. You just cannot apply for this funding for your own housing. We can do 0% loans, forgivable loans, and loan subsidies. Annually, again, we get about $3 million for this program, and then we have some program income, which is loan payments that come back in. That can increase that up to usually around $4 million a year is where we're at now. The funding is distributed between rural areas of South Dakota and our urban areas. And so urban is just Sioux Falls and Rapid City. So they get 30% of this funding, and the other 70% goes to the rest of the state. And then further, we do 75% for housing development, and the other 25% is for programs. That would be down payment assistance, homeowner rehab, and some homeless prevention activities. Those funds are highly competitive. The program funds, the down payment assistance, that only happens once a year. It's competitive. Your applications have to be in again the end of August. And then we've been making those awards typically by October. So an example of one of our Housing Opportunity Fund projects is Harriet. It's a small town, under 500 people. They did a governor's house in 2023. This is a 3-bedroom governor's house. So as you can see, it doesn't look anything like the first governor's house I showed you. So if you're a developer and you want to develop governor's houses, you can kind of do with it what you want. You can see they added a breezeway onto this house. They set the house a different direction, like a narrow lot. Added the breezeway, did a 2-stall garage. It's on a full basement. They used that breezeway area to add their staircase to go into the basement, so they didn't pull any of their living space out of the governor's house by putting that staircase into the breezeway. So it's a beautiful house. I think it would fit into most any development that you guys probably have in your community. We also have a housing infrastructure financing program, and this was created by the legislature back in 2023 with Senate Bill 41, and we were allocated $200 million to do infrastructure across South Dakota. And this is strictly for roads, water, sewer, curb and gutter, anything that does not include the building of the units. So $150 million of this was from the general fund from the state of South Dakota, and $50 million was federal ARPA funds. And so the $50 million ARPA funds was all grant money that had to be strictly used for water and sewer projects. And then $150 from general funds, $50 million of that was grants, and $100 million is for loans. So the loans are currently at 2%. The grant funding is all awarded out, so there are no grant funds available at this point, but there are still loan funds available. The distribution of funds for the HIF program, 30% went to Rapid City and Sioux Falls, and 70% went to the remainder of the state. The applications are on a first-come, first-served basis. Again, there's just loan funds available right now, so if anybody's interested in doing infrastructure projects, you can reach out and we can help you with that application process. The infrastructure has to be public infrastructure. So in the end, when the project is done, your local political subdivision, your city, your county has to own the infrastructure. So when you apply for these funds, you have to submit a resolution from your city that says they agree to take over the ownership of this infrastructure once you put it in. And that's just to guarantee that the roads will be maintained, the water and sewer is going to be maintained for the long term. Any for-profit, nonprofit, tribal government, housing authority, any agency of the state is eligible to apply for this funding. The funding is limited to 1/3 of your total project costs, and then there's a further limitation on a per unit calculation, depending on if you're going to do single-family homes or multifamily units. And I would just put up a couple examples of projects that have been done here in Watertown. The Lakes of Willow Creek, second edition, is a project that was done. It was infrastructure for 74 single-family lots, and they received grant funding to allow their lots to be sold for a discounted price. And then there's the Harmony Hill development, also received infrastructure funding, and this was 28 acres that ultimately will provide for 160 units of affordable housing, 40 units of senior housing, 137 single-family lots, and 40 twin home units. So quite a bit going on here in the city of Watertown. And this is just another example of your neighboring community, Brookings. They did a Branch Creek project. This was infrastructure development of 100 lots for 135 single-family units. So they're going to do 45 single-family homes, 45 townhomes, and 45 duplexes. The city passed a TIF to assist with this project. And due to the TIF involvement, the homes prices must meet the South Dakota first-time homebuyer limit, which is currently $410,000. They applied for the HIF grant, which allows the developer to sell their lots at a $10,000 to $30,000 discount, depending on the size of the lot, and that resulted in their lot prices ranging from $30,000 to $50,000, which is pretty good for the community of Brookings. Their total project cost was just under $6.5 million. Is what their projected costs were going to be. And their funding sources, they had equity because they already owned the land, and then they got the HIF grant and also got a loan from First Bank and Trust. In the end, their total project costs came in just over $7 million. And this project has been completed. All the funds have been dispersed, and they have homes already constructed. So they have 33 homes have been constructed and sold, and another 23 homes are under construction. So these are the homes that they are building, which all fall under the $410,000 first-time homebuyer limit. On the end here, this is a triplex. So they've got 3 units on this end one, and just one of those units is selling for $343,800, and it's a 3-bed, 3-bath house. And then on the far end is also another triplex. And so one of those units, smaller, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, is selling for $249,900. So they've had great success in Brookings with this project. If you have specific questions on any of these programs, we do have a development officer that works typically with one program each. And so our Housing Opportunity Fund officer is Bridget Lesh. For Home and Housing Trust Fund, you can reach out to Rebecca Whidbey. Tax credits is Scott Rounds, and the infrastructure program, you would reach out to me for that. And that is all I have. There's my contact information, and I think we'll probably take questions at the end. So I'll turn it over to Lori.
Oh, geez, I got paper, okay. Thank you for having me here today, and Angie for the introduction. And when she said 30 years, I just want you to know that I started when I was in kindergarten. And we won't talk about how many years I stayed in kindergarten. And you also know that probably my age because I brought paper to the podium, but it's all good. Again, thank you for being here. I'm with Grow South Dakota, And Grow South Dakota is actually a combination of 3 organizations, nonprofits. We're Northeast South Dakota Community Action Program, and we are celebrating our 60th year in that. And then we are also the Northeast South Dakota Economic Development Corporation, and then we are also Grow South Dakota. In 2012, we just rebranded to become known as Grow South Dakota. So when you come to the table or have questions, you just need to know that that's who we are. You don't need to know which organization the funding source comes from. We do business lending, and for that, so if you have a desire or an inspiration to expand or create a business, we have loans available for that. But today I'm going to focus on our business housing lending. And the types of loans that we have for housing development, we include single-family units, multifamily units, duplexes, tax increment financing as well. We can be the loan or the mortgager for those types of projects. Projects that we finance include, just to name a few, multifamily, Lake Norton. There's several single-family units. These are spec developments. There's no income restrictions on that. And then we also do some multifamily subsidized projects where we come in as the lender for part of that loan. What does it take to do a business housing development for financing and what we have available? Today, our new construction project loans are at 6%. Any other housing project loans that you have, so like acquisition, rehab, those are going to be between 6.9 and 7.4% interest. We're going to do our standard due diligence on those, and then also I got to get my paper because I'm not sure how to move this down, maybe. There we are, good. I'm learning technology today, wonderful. But anyways, due diligence on that. And I want to just maybe highlight some of those things of having a cash flow, doing your pro formas, making sure that the project is going to work. And some of the benefits that we offer would be that we will partner with other lenders. We will also, our closing costs are probably a little bit lower. We have a 1% origination fee. We're going to do, again, due diligence, title, insurance documents, and any security agreements to go along. We have flexible terms in the number of years and the interest only, construction loans, permanent loans, multiple draws. So again, just looking at some of those different products. One of the things that I do appreciate about it is you don't have to have a housing study, but we do like to know that you have done some due diligence in knowing that what is truly needed in your community, not based on gossip or we really need this. You have some skin there or knowledge about what is the need in your community. And then we don't require an appraisal. So there again, doing your due diligence, making sure that the costs are going to be there, that you're going to be able to sell your house for that, or multifamily unit or whatever it may be. So once you have your house construction or your multiple duplex or single family unit, we also provide individuals lending, and some of the different programs that we have available for that include first mortgage lending, down payment closing cost assistance, home buyer education, and then homeowner repair and weatherization programs. The home mortgage loan lending, again, we're going to do some underwriting on that, probably similar to what a conventional loan is going to look at, but maybe a little less or a little more flexibility. How's that? Maximum loan we have right now is at $250,000. Depending on funding source and the project that the person is looking at purchasing, we may be able to go higher. 7%, 10-year balloon, 30-year amortization. So we're looking at basically we're the gateway for home ownership for these families. We do loan on 100% of the appraised value or the purchase price, whichever is least. Down payment closing cost assistance, right now what we have available is for rural designation. So anything that is not Rapid City or Sioux Falls would probably fall into that rural designation. We are looking at 80% and below AMI, 0% deferred loan, and it comes in as a second. We also sometimes will go into a third position if we need to do that. There are purchase price limits on the down payment assistance, and for the majority of the financing, it's going to be probably around that $224,000. For new construction, probably $284,000. We are a home buyer education. We provide home buyer education. We are a HUD certified counseling entity, and with that goes a lot of different components as far as credibility and integrity of the organization. We can provide that one-on-one, or we can do that online and virtual. Home repair and weatherization, both the DOE and weatherization and LEAP furnace repair replacement. The applicant needs to be on the State Energy Assistance Program. We provide this service in 17 counties in the state. Every county in the state is covered. Cottington County is covered underneath the ICAP Community Action Agency. The Department of Energy, DOE weatherization is also dependent on money, how many we can do, very specific on what types of products can, or energy efficiency measures can be done on those homes. And then elderly, disabled, and families with children are a priority. LEAP furnace, every county again is covered by a CAP agency. And the LEAP furnace can do year-round, but it is not a maintenance program. It needs to be if you are without heat. So if somebody is without, their furnace quit in summer, you can still go in underneath this program. There is no dollar amount, again, based on what's available from the state and what each CAP agency has been given. And then we also apply for competitive grants for home repairs or renovations, and it's very competitive. Housing Opportunity is one of the funding sources that we do. Ranges typically around $15,000 to $20,000 per home, and there again, limited number of availability for homes that meet the 80% and below income on those. So what are some next steps? Contact us. If you have a project or are thinking about something, contact us. Have that discussion, see how we can be a partner or a piece of that idea or project. And then some of the other things, maybe just partner with other contractors. Maybe you have a skill that is very good. Maybe you do an excellent job at roofing, but you can't do roofing all year round. Is there something else? Or maybe they're doing some housing, spec housing in the winter, so maybe you can help with some other parts of that project. What's your niche? What are you good at? Sell that. Sell that to another contractor, sell that to another community. Reach out to realtors, see what they are noticing as a need. What's listed? Are they older homes? Do they need repairs? Is it acquisition rehab, or is it new construction, independent care? What type of housing are they seeing in their market or from their clients? Create a specialty area. Expand on what you do. So if you already have a business and you have some downtime, maybe look at expanding on that. And then what you don't do so well, maybe contract that out. So if you don't do well at billings or financials, maybe contract that out. Give yourself time to do what you do best. During some of that downtime, maybe build components that are needed by other contractors or homeowners, like decks or stairs or finishings like casings and trim, smaller components, prefabricated walls. Maybe those are some ways that you can help with this innovation part of housing. Redesign. Look at how you build. Are we doing ADUs, accessory dwelling units? What's the cost to build an apartment over a garage? Making a single-family structure into a duplex by adding a separate entrance or rehabbing when you're doing that in rehab or in new construction. And in a duplex, maybe consider the basement as apartment. So we saw the Harriet house, split-level house, had a separate entrance almost. You had a breezeway. Could you have your basement floor be an apartment as well as your main floor be an apartment? Some of the other things I had on my paper sheet was the mentoring. Workforce development is huge. And like the mayor was saying this morning, we can't rob one worker from another and expect to get more housing. We have to create workforce development. And so let's start early. High school, maybe they've already formed what they're wanting to do. Let's start in middle school. Start engaging and being a mentor on just who you are and what you do well. And questions again will be at the end, but thank you again for having me.
Does that work? All right. All right, my name is Michael Batlin. It's nice to see everybody. I'm with USDA's Rural Development. It is early. I love this speaker. It's kind of blocking me from the mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for coming out. If everybody could just stand up if you're able real quick. Stand up and just take a big breath, shake it off. It's early in the morning. I do this at all my speeches, so I'm sorry. Big breath. And we're done. Thank y'all so much. I am with USDA's Rural Development. I do want to take a second and honor our brand new state director that's here today, Miss Lorraine Pollack. She has a long history in housing in South Dakota, and we're excited to have her. So you could stand and say, there it is. She's here. Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm going to be in trouble for that one. I am the Single Family Housing Program Director for the great state of South Dakota for USDA. And next slide. Okay, so here's the deal. I usually read slides, and we have a public information officer, and he said, stop it. So he made me a slide with a picture on it. Appreciate it. So yeah, this is talking about our 502 direct loan. And what this is a direct-to-consumer loan. So you builders, you real estate agents, mortgage lenders, we're here, right? So just think of us like the government mortgage lending company, if you will. And our 502 program behind me here is our flagship program. It's direct-to-consumer. It helps folks by buying modest homes. We do have income limits. It's going to be anywhere between $45,000 and $75,000, kind of depending on the household size. So it's a pretty wide range. Let's see. We do have a max loan amount, a new one of $324,700. And then some big positives about our 502 program is it's a 33-year term, and it can be stretched out all the way to 38 years. And another big positive about our program is if the borrower qualifies, we do allow an interest subsidy. So if, like, for today, our interest rate is 5% for the standard borrower, but if the borrower qualifies, then we do have an interest rate subsidy that brings the interest rate to feel like a 1% interest rate on the loan. So it makes that payment feel a lot more manageable. Let's see. Yeah, so this loan can be used for buying a brand new home, buying a spec home like we talked about this morning. We do partner with other agencies and groups. We love you guys so much. New construction, pre-existing, you can use our 502 program for any of it. And then we'll jump into, so this is another picture. Our 504 home repair program, so that was for the purchase of or for financing for new or existing homes for borrowers. We have our 504 program that helps provide loans and grants for folks that are needing to fix up their existing homes, right? So that's one of the qualifications. They have to own the home. And what this allows is for very low and low income folks to correct or repair safety or hazard issues in their homes, such as, wiring that needs to be updated, or a new roof, or even the elderly aging. Can provide those, the bathtubs with the wall on them, like ramps to enter the house. So as we have aging borrowers, that it'll help update their home to make it, more accessible for them. So the loans part of this, so we do loans and grants. The loans part is up to $40,000 at a 1% interest rate over 20 years. So that's pretty awesome. And then the grant part is up to $10,000, and that's for very low and elderly borrowers. So that's our 504 program. Awesome. And last, okay, so I'm quick. This is a picture of a roof. Okay, so it's talking about our disaster home repair grants. So South Dakota has awarded, like we've received, for 3 presidentially declared disaster areas, and Watertown is part of one of them. You can do repairs to your home and use what we call as our disaster grant. Disaster meaning repairing the home from a disaster, not as a disaster going through the process. So our 504 disaster home repair grant is up to $34,000, and it has to be damaged received from a storm. And I will tell you your storm dates here. They are on my phone. See, this is why paper is good. It is for Watertown, it is April 9th through May 5th of 2023. We have money to help repair from that disaster for the flooding that occurred. And something exciting with the new administration, they're taking this program and adapting it. So as disasters happen, we will receive funding much more quickly than we have in the past. So it's really exciting, because a lot of times we were having to only apply the disaster grant to disasters that happened in 2022. However, Congress and the new administration, as the disaster occurs, it's declared a disaster area, then funding will appropriate through the channels much more quickly, and we'll be able to actively help with an event that's recently happened. So that's exciting news. Here's the most important slide. Do me a favor. Please take a picture of this slide. I'm out of business cards. So if you guys have borrowers or clients that need help with home financing or repair homes or anything like that, please, let me get out of the way. I'm a big dude. Give us a call. We'll be there to help out, and we appreciate you guys. Big round of applause. Straight into questions? Yeah, you gonna moderate us? I can moderate. You got it, all right.
All right, does anyone have any questions? Just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll come find you.
There's one.
Michael, I'm just wondering, on your last presentation, is there a income limit on that?
The disaster, yep, no, that's a great question. So that one is waived. So typically it's for very low income borrowers. but we're allowed to go to our low-income borrowers, so we get to go up a tier. If you go to our website, usda.rd.sd.gov, it does have a chart with our income limits on there, and you'll be able to see. It varies by household, so the household size, and we also do an adjusted income calculation. So if you pay for things like daycare, or if you're taking care of a disabled person, those things are deducted from your income when we're doing the calculation. You got it. I'm holding the microphone, not using it.
My question is for Amy. Can you talk a little bit about the HOF funds and how some of those can qualify to be forgiven?
My mic's not working, but I can talk loud. Typically with the Housing Opportunity Fund, if you apply for the funds, I'll just use like a duplex, for example. If you're in a rural community and you apply for Housing Opportunity Funds to do a duplex, if your total project cost is $500,000 and you get $250 in Housing Opportunity Funds, you can apply for those funds to be forgiven. And typically we would determine the forgiveness based on your projected cash flow. So if you build a duplex in a rural community, you probably cannot cash flow a $500,000 loan to build that duplex off of 2 units rent. So you're not going to cash flow. We would see that within your projections, take that into consideration, and then look at the forgiveness amount. Sometimes you might be able to cash flow a portion of the Housing Opportunity Funds, so we can be very flexible in the repayment terms. Sometimes we'll ask you to repay half of the Housing Opportunity Funds, it's at 0% interest, and we might forgive the other half. So it's really based on the cash flow projection of your project. Thanks, Reed. Anyone else have any questions?
Michael, can you hear me?
I can. Thanks.
All
How are you
right.
doing?
First of all, with your program, the 502 program, at one point in time there were restrictions in that you couldn't do it in larger communities. I think it was 5,000 population or something like that. Can you do those loans in Watertown?
Yes, sir. They are eligible in Watertown. So the only 2 areas that are currently ineligible are inside of Sioux Falls city limits and then inside Rapid City limits, to include Brandon and Rapid Valley. But other than that, the entire state is wide open for the rural area. And to continue answering that, every 5 years we do an evaluation of each county, each city, to see if it still qualifies. So completed one 3 years ago. Is when I first started with the agency, so it was my introduction to the state, was going around and making sure things were rural, and I'm much better at saying that word now. You say rural. So Ms. Lorraine and I will take a look in 2 years. We'll start our process, and of course we'll send comments out to the public and publish our findings. So yeah, we are eligible in Watertown, sir.
Okay, you referenced you can fund a modest-sized home. Help us understand what modest is.
It's a great question. So in the business, we say something, it's like this mythical unicorn we call underwriter discretion. But does it have an exact square footage? Does it have, can you not have a 3-car garage? No, there's no set hard guideline that has a square footage. We look at surrounding homes to see if they're comparable. I can tell you we've had an existing home with a 3-car garage that was eligible, and then after reviewing one that had a 3-car garage plus 4 additional shops plus 2,000 square foot house plus a mother-in-law suite, that one beat the modest. So we just evaluate each one of them individually, and I guess a guideline would be 2,000 square feet and a 2-car garage. However, that's not a hard guideline by any means. We just take a look at each one of them individually.
And do you fund through the building process, or do you wait until you get a finished product?
No, sir. So we're a one-time close, and we fund through the building process. So actually, when I left retail mortgage lending that I did for 10 years, that's a long story. I'm just like everybody else in the Army, and went into mortgage lending. So I left retail mortgage lending, and the hardest mortgage deal to close to me as a retail lender was a construction deal. I was very involved with the checkpoints, the building permits, the surveys, oh my gosh. But when I got to the government side, surprisingly enough, it is much easier with us. And so yes, sir, we do fund through the process with a one-time close, and it's pretty smooth, good process.
And you work with individual borrowers only, correct?
Yes, sir. So direct-to-consumer financing is really our kind of flagship programs. Now, not to say we don't work with nonprofits or self-help housing projects or housing development corporations. We do have programs. Our other programs of the state include our business programs, and then our community facilities programs are the other two programs for the state. So we do have programs where we work directly with partners. But our two flagships being the direct consumer.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes, sir.
Mike.
I've got a question. Obviously peer pressure, because Charlie asked a lot of good questions. My question is on the funding, on the federal and state funding, on your presentations. By memory, you had a lot of programs of $3 million available. And I'm just wondering, at the end of the year and the end of the cycle, is there any of that money available? I'm assuming it's used up. And is there any opportunity for additional funding? Because I'm thinking that if there was more funding, of course, money has to come from someplace. Is there any opportunity to increase any of the federal or state funding to get to the point where there's more funding in that pot to accelerate?
Well, as long as I've been there, the funding limits have been the same. So, I would take legislative action to increase any of those pots of funds for like the home program. This year we did get an increase in the housing tax credit program, and so that'll be a little bit larger, maybe enough to do one extra project a year. Typically we've been doing 6 projects a year. This year we did 7, but all those projects layered all those funding sources that I talked about. So they all had the tax credits, the home, and the trust funds within each of those projects. So really, for the state program, the Housing Opportunity Fund, that would take legislative action to get that amount increased. We only get $1 million a year from the state of South Dakota, and then South Dakota Housing puts in $1.5 million. Get a little bit extra from some interest income and some bond volume cap fees. So that's where we kind of get to that $3 million mark. But yeah, it would take legislative action to increase those amounts.
I would say that.
This is a vague question, but I mean, if money were no object, but based on the demand and how much money you've got in those funds, I mean, what amount, being realistic, what amount would be the right amount to be able to sustain? Because $3 million doesn't cover what 10 years did. Heard you mention that it hasn't increased. So cost of inflation, we're getting less and less. I'm preaching to the choir, but what would be a number that you would shoot for if we could?
So just Tuesday, we were, Homes for South Dakota is a loose group of coalition members making up from all different kinds of housing organizations and individuals. And we met with the legislators on Tuesday and had some discussion about that. Typically, we're advocating for at least $10 million every year for that Housing Opportunity Fund. Whether or not that's ever going to happen, we get $1 million. But the number of applications that have not been funded is close to $27 million that has not been funded. So you think about that over the years, how many houses could have been built, how many multifamily units could have been built if we were to invest in the future. And through the Housing Opportunity Fund, it is a proven caveat right now for builders, for down payment assistance, for home rehab. All the boxes are checked. And we all know that there's a need, but we kind of keep track of the housing studies that the SDH has provided for communities, and there's like 120 of them. And I have some notes on it, but just off the top of my head, it's over 10,000 new for rental and single family homes in 120 communities. Rapid City has their own housing, and that showed 5,500 in single family and multi, and then the surrounding area, 3,600. So you're looking at 20,000 in less than a third of the communities, and we get $1 million. So your voice is what's going to impact whether or not money goes into that fund. So if you know a legislator, or you don't even know them, but you have a representative, be sure to reach out. Right now they're meeting.
Thanks, Lori. Yeah, it's really difficult, when there's only $3 million to start with, and then we have some that goes into the programs, your down payment assistance and rehab. $300,000 for a project doesn't go very far, right? It works well for a duplex, really. So, yeah.
So Amy,
Yeah.
so I was looking at your slide, you were referencing on the 2% loan money that was established a couple years ago, that's $64 million. That's being proposed to be taken away in Senate Bill 76 to be transferred to the airports in Rapid City at Sioux Falls. That's what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, there's 3 different bills that are being proposed to make changes to the infrastructure funds. One of them would change those loan funds so that instead of being able to get a third, you could get 50% of your project, so that would be helpful. Another one, somebody wants to take a portion of those funds and create a down payment assistance program for manufactured housing. They're proposing to take $5 million. And then the other one would transfer the remaining loan funds over to the Governor's Office of Economic Development, use $30 million for the airports, and then the remaining would just be in the general fund for Governor's Office of Economic Development. Yep.
Thanks. My question is for Amy, but Lori, Michael, feel free to chime in. We have a team here in Watertown that's looking at how can we increase the number of homes that are rehabbed and and the number of homes built on infill lots. We've come to appreciate the work done by 2 nonprofits, one in Aberdeen, one in Mitchell, that are doing that type of work. Could you share how an organization like those 2 might use some of your programs to accomplish that work? You may not talk about everything, but maybe give a couple examples.
Sure. So Happy in Aberdeen, Homes Are Possible Inc., and then MAHI, which is Mitchell Area Housing in Mitchell, are 2 organizations that apply for the Housing Opportunity Funds in the program section for rehab dollars. So they, get whatever, $50,000, $80,000 a year to rehab homes. So the individual homeowner that needs the rehabilitation done goes to those agencies, applies for the funding. They're approved based on income restrictions. They go out, the agencies go out to the home, do inspections, determine the work that needs to be done to make sure that we're doing a complete rehab, because we don't want to just, put lipstick on the pig, so to speak. We want to make sure that if the home is being rehabbed, that it's, everything is being considered. So if there's an agency in Watertown interested in applying for those funds, it's highly competitive. We get, 15 to 20 applications a year for the program funds, and we're only able to usually fund maybe 8 to 10, 11, depending on how much money they each apply
20%.
for. Yeah, right, exactly. So Grow South Dakota applies every year for rehab and down payment funds both. So, does that answer your question? You know, if you want to do the project side of it, if there's a rundown home in Watertown that a developer or a contractor wants to buy and it needs to be rehabbed, you know, you can apply for the housing opportunity funds to buy that home and then rehab it to resell it. And you have to resell it then to an income qualified buyer. So that works really well in a lot of our communities too.
And I can just expand on that too. So Grow South Dakota has numerous times provided loans to contractors who want to do the acquisition, rehab, and then resell or even re-rent. So those are opportunities that are available. No income restrictions on those.
I got it. Hey, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. That's a good question. All right, so got my little fact sheet up here. So the main few things that come to mind are the 504 program that I brought up here, and that's direct to consumer. Now we do have a few other programs that we have in our housing program. So one of them I'll bring up is our Housing Preservation Grant, or HPG. So it's a competitive grant that is awarded typically once per year. A NOFO or NOFA, Notice of Federal Funding or Federal Availability, will come out, and if you don't receive those newsletters that come out, there's a sign up for, I'll remember when I'm not thinking about it here, govdelivery.gov is what you sign up for. There it is. Miss Lorraine's giving me the north and south. So Housing Preservation Grant, competitive, it's a nationwide award, and then individual nonprofits or groups will apply for the Housing Preservation Grant and typically awarded a percentage. And that could be used to fix up homes, but it's to be facilitated through the nonprofit. Another one is our Sub-Up Housing, our technical assistance, 523. So what we do is we provide technical assistance for nonprofits who are doing just that, fixing up homes and rehabbing them. And we have a wonderful partner there in the back here, ICAP, we work with on that. And yeah, so those are the two big ones that come to mind. 5 minutes.
We got our 5 questions, right?
Hey, Amy, on the governor's house, what can be done to shorten the cycle time on the 18 or 20 months that it takes from the time you qualify to get to a unit that's deliverable?
Mike Carson's actually in the audience, and he could probably answer that question for you.
Honestly, we're the guests of the Department of Corrections at their facility, so we kind of work when they say we can work. Bill time is 150 days. We try to manage the program in a way that makes it so our inmates are learning how to build a house, not a production facility. Anyway, so the only way we could really speed it up is if we just did it as a production facility, you know, the Part A and Widget B, and just that. And we're probably not going to do that because the goal is to turn these inmates into, you know, people that can work in the industry in the future. So, and with the build time of 150 days, that's probably what it's going to be. We have lowered the lead time 2 years ago. It was 3 years. It was 36 months, and we're down to 12 to 18 months right now. And honestly, our bigger issue is finding people that have foundations and lots and financing in place. We have houses done, parked all over the place, that are waiting for foundations to be done.
Thank you, Mike. The idea is that if in Watertown we develop a program where we have the site prepped and the lot already prepared, what can we do? And one of the discussions that has been floating around is how do we link Lake Area Tech and the construction program there to team up with the prison labor force and maybe shorten that cycle time? Because if I was in a position to do a home, 18 months is a long time for me to wait to meet the needs. We're trying to shorten that cycle time, so that's a question. And as a programming side, we're going to record all this, so Northeastern Radio will have this posted on their website. The entire facility. We'll also have that link on our website after the fact, and then the slides will also be loaded up, so don't worry about having to take pictures or take notes, or if you're like me, tired of writing on your hand, so we'll have all those covered. Mike, we got 2 minutes, one more question maybe?
I was going to also just mention that, you know, when we're thinking about trying to make affordable housing, we always look to government, you know, and what kind of subsidies are available, but maybe look at your own community. Do you have investors in your community that could potentially start a revolving loan fund or start a rehab loan fund program? Can your city provide some part of that and then have investors as well? So, you know, look within and see what you have available within your community. We have a lot of people who have corn sitting in a bin that maybe if they were to sell it could invest in their own community, you know, and just look at who's in your community that can be part of this housing solution.
Awesome. Looks like our time's up here. Also, I do have a little cheat sheet for all of SD Housing's programs on the WDC table, just right outside here. So if you want, you know, a complete list of all their programs with all the details, you can grab one of those cheat sheets on your way out too. We're just going to be taking about a 15-minute break here, grab some coffee, something to eat. We'll be back here at 10 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angie. It is a pleasure to be with all of you this morning. I will apologize in advance. I move around a lot when I speak. So hopefully I can see the heads following me. If not, that means you fell asleep and I did a horrible job. So you can blame me for that. As Angie said, I work for the Black Hills Area Community Foundation. Our main office is in Rapid City, South Dakota. We cover 7 counties in the Black Hills of South Dakota. All the way north going to Butte, Meade, Lawrence, Pennington, and then down to the south to Custer, Fall River, and Ogallala, Lakota. So very diversified and very different communities all across the Black Hills is the area we really try to impact. I need to thank whoever did the speaker lineup. So Angie, if that was you, the panel that presented earlier did a fabulous job. And a lot of the concepts and funding sources they talked about are what we're going to talk about stacking today. And so a lot of that heavy lifting out of the way. Very glad that you guys heard a lot of those concepts so that we can start from a good solid base. I am going to start by making fun of myself. Last night I was looking at my slide deck, realized I put the wrong date on this. Wrong date's on the next session too. When I speak in the panel. I do actually know what day it is. Thankfully, I showed up on the correct one. So, that is not today. It is the 12th. I have one large ask that I want to use to frame my presentation because I think that is going to be the way to provide the most benefit to all of you with the information we're going to discuss today. So, great here, but I think that also will provide a lot of benefit to all of you when you go back to your communities and you attempt to implement strategies on creating housing. I think if we look at the state as a whole and our country, we're at a tipping point where affordability has become such a massive issue for everybody in all of our communities. When we see the federal government and state legislators talking about affordability issues across our communities, we are at a good place to have intelligent conversations about what it is we can do to make it better for ourselves, for our families, for our neighbors. So, using a construction analogy, since we're talking housing, I want to frame up my presentation. I have some primers that I'm going to ask you to think about as we go through things. So these are my asks, there's 5 of them. And again, I think this is going to be great for all of you when you go back home and try to implement strategies in your communities. Primer 1, beg, borrow, and steal. Ideas, okay? I'm going to go back to my bio that Angie read, and I'm going to point out some things that aren't there. I've only been in my role for 2 years. Prior to me, our foundation did not have a housing specialist. We did not have a single staff member that worked in housing. Everything that you see today, I stole from somebody else. I didn't create any of this. I am taking other people's ideas and tweaking them to put them in our communities because I have had to compress the learning curve. Somebody asked earlier at the presentation about shrinking the timelines for how fast governor's homes can be delivered. Gaining the information and using that knowledge in your communities also has to be compressed. So use the people and ideas that you find in events like today. Take them home. I give you full license. Please steal anything you want from this presentation today. If it doesn't make sense when I talk about it, please follow up with me. Mike can attest. You can even LinkedIn me without ever knowing me. I will respond to you. Number 2, I'm going to flip back and forth between 2 slides because I have a visual on the next slide. We are all here today because traditional market forces and economics, along with financing expectations, do not work to solve the problem we have. There's no way around that. If it did, we wouldn't have to be here. I wouldn't have a job, and I wouldn't be upset about that because the people in our communities would have a place to live. So, when we think about traditional financing expectations, capital stacks, they look, I think I went too far away, a lot like this stack right here. What you traditionally see when somebody is building housing, developer, individual builder, communities, businesses, they are going to have some percentage of developer equity in a project with whatever risk the financing institution is willing to take on, and then they're going to borrow the rest of the money. The way that this works today is that we have first-time homes that cost $410,000. If you look at the AMIs for the people that live in this state, they cannot afford what it costs to have a $410,000 home. So we have to get creative. We have to do some different things and go back to this. This doesn't work. So what do we have to do? Let's look at this bottom part, okay? We need to do whatever we can to manipulate costs and inputs. Managing those things as we develop and create housing is how we get to affordable. I'm not going to talk a lot about AMIs. I know that Amy did with a lot of the programs. They do exist. There needs to be some careful planning to massage some of these programs together. But I will tell you from my experience in this state and other states, the South Dakota Housing Authority staff is fabulous at helping you work through these things. So please ask questions of them. They will help you as best they can. So, cost manipulation, input manipulation. When we do affordable housing, and this is not at all the scale, this is just a representation we use when we're talking to communities about what it takes to capital stack projects that are affordable, you end up with something like this. We're gonna look at 9 projects later in my presentation, and none of them are anywhere near this pretty. They're all very different. It all depends on the scale, the location, and the developer, what they are willing to do, what they are willing not to do, but it also matters what our communities want to do and what they are willing to do. Sometimes our communities say they want something, not to pick on any politicians, say they want something, don't actually want to do it. So, want to come at it from a realistic perspective when it comes to that. Amy talked about several of these things up here earlier, her presentation. A lot of tax credit equity. Unfortunately, and I believe this was kind of a question earlier about how we make bigger pots of funding for South Dakota. Better or worse, and I live in this state because of our population, the fact that it's low, because of that, all these federal programs are calculated based upon the state's population. That's how we get our allocation. If you want bigger numbers, we need more people. That's really the only way that changes, for the federal programming at least. So we're kind of stuck when it comes to that. So where do we go from there? We have our state funding slice. DDF stands for Deferred Developer Fee. If you find the right partners, and we're going to talk about partners upcoming, they will sometimes not take money out of a project up front. I know that sounds heinous if you're a for-profit developer, but sometimes this is what we need to make the numbers happen. Also, we have at the foundation I work for what we call local trust funds. A lot of times, even with these subsidies at the state level to pay for these projects, we need additional financing to get the projects completed and get them across the line. I'm going to talk about where those inputs come in when I show the capital stacks here upcoming. Every year, every project we see, these numbers going up. They're not getting any cheaper, which also makes it a challenge at the state housing authority level because the dollars are minimal. They can only stretch so far. Projects get more expensive year over year. Hopefully we don't keep losing projects, but that does happen sometimes. Okay, so we're just flipping back real quick. Cost input, management, and manipulation, incredibly important to get these things done. Okay. Back to I've only been doing this for 2 years. Another thing you'll notice on my resume is a lack of education in this area. Myself and my team have spent a lot of time trying to figure out if there is anywhere in the country that actually educates people on how to do this. There's one program in Colorado. Okay, so to get these things done, you need the right partners and you need a lot of them. It is incredibly complex and sophisticated, and there are a lot of ways to make mistakes. Please don't let that be something that inhibits you from trying to do these things, but also please know we need to find the people in the room. She moved, but since her employee called her out, Lorraine, fabulous, probably the most knowledgeable person about housing in this entire room, if not the entire state. Okay, so if you can get time with Lorraine, if you can get time with South Dakota Housing Authority folks, they are going to be your key drivers of getting you where you need to go. The other thing that is incredibly important is when we're doing community housing, we need to bring in our community partners. I made a comment a few minutes ago. Sometimes politicians will say they want something they don't actually want. The only way to overcome that is public pressure. So if you can get the right people on board in the right spaces, you can sometimes get what you need going that route. I know earlier, I'll make a funny, at least I think it's funny joke. Heard there was bankers in the room. I'm a reformed banker. I'm very proud of that. I had a problem for 13 years, but I'm back. When we talk about numbers, and I know the numbers get incredibly hard, difficult, complex. Most of the bankers that I've ever worked with care about their communities. If you need somebody to help you with these things, find those folks. It's not a banker, maybe it's an accountant. I will also tell you this. I never privately practiced. I'm also a reformed attorney. My wife, when we first met, was like, I want nothing to do with you. You're a banker and an attorney. You got to be the worst person on the face of the earth. But we are now been married for 13 years. So, overcame that obstacle. For those of you that don't know and you're concerned about legal and technical things, for every person that is a member of the state bar in the state of South Dakota, we are heavily encouraged to do a minimum of 40 hours of nonprofit work every year. Stick them to that. If you need help with the legal stuff, go to them and say, I know you're supposed to be doing this, and we need help. Okay? Don't be afraid. Ask first. Sometimes a little pressure necessary. Primer number 4. Your only restrictions are the law, physics, and your imagination. I do not consider myself a creative person. Surround myself with creative people to overcome things like that. We need to break the mold of everybody needs a huge house, McMansion, 3-stall garage, white picket fence, at least 1/4 of an acre of property. I understand that the federal government, a lot of our institutions have been pushing that dream on the population for a long time. We can't do it anymore. It doesn't work. And if we continue down that path, we are going to end up being a country of renters. And those houses are going to go away anyway, because the amount of people that can buy them is going to be so minuscule, they'll stop getting built. Okay? We have to find different ways, use our imagination, and say, what can these properties look like? It doesn't have to look like it traditionally does in the American nomenclature. Townhouses, ADUs, modulars, all of these things have a place in our communities. And I will tell you, if you want people to have a healthy housing journey throughout their lifetime, they need those opportunities. You can't go today from college with the debt that most people have, maybe car debt, credit card debt, medical debt, and even get underwritten for a mortgage if you make enough money to buy one of these homes. Okay, so we have to be imaginative. We got to come up with new ideas as to how we can do different kinds of housing. This one usually gets me in trouble. Thankfully, there's nobody from my foundation here, so don't tell on me, please. No matter what you do, people in your community are going to be unhappy. Okay? You know, we all have different goals, different perspectives, different ideas of what our communities should look like, but we can't be restricted by that. Somebody asked earlier, I think one of the gentlemen over here, best case scenario, perfect world, how much funding would it take to build all of the units we need in South Dakota or in our communities? This is what I tell people when we talk to funders, and my funding is significantly different than the way the state works. If you give me money, I will spend it. And I will prove to you that I can spend it in projects, and I will keep spending until you stop giving it to me. This will make people upset, because at a certain point, you tip the market, and the market rate units are forced to compress their rents to make them affordable for more individuals. They do not like that. That's not the reason they got in the business, right? They built a property because they want it to cash flow, they want to make as much money as possible, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if we truly want to get to the point where affordability is an option for everyone, we need to build so many units of housing that even those that were there before can't have artificially elevated rents. And I will tell you, I get asked this question a lot, today in Rapid City, South Dakota, middle of the road apartment unit, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, costs $1,278 a month. Most families of 4 can't afford that on a healthy budget when you look at our state's AMI. So we have decoupled the ability to do certain things. Top market, last I saw last month, most expensive unit in Rapid City was $6,000. I understand there is a need and a want for folks in that market, but if that's what we're truly going to spend our time building, we're just going to put ourselves in a situation we're never being able to dig out of, unfortunately. All right, got through all my prep stuff. Want to do some quick acronyms, definitions. Again, previous panel, thank you very much. This is obviously going to be available for everybody, so you don't have to memorize any of this. When you see in the capital stacks upcoming, the reason I did this, I had to use all of the short acronyms to reference the funding sources. Otherwise, there's too much information on the slide. So this is my way to try to minimize that. Okay, so this is one of the things we do at the foundation is Strategic Housing Trust Fund. We work with developers to get a pro forma and their capital stack to a place where they can get funded by most of the sources, either at the state level, and Amy can tell you this, we piggyback a lot of projects together. I email her more than she probably wants to hear from me, but she's fabulous and always responds, so thank you, Amy. But what happens is, with the expenses, a lot of times they need another $500,000, $750,000 to get that project across the line. So we come in with incredibly cheap, flexible financing from our housing trust funds, and we give them a loan so that they can get that done. Just for reference, a lot of times our money is 15-year term. Sometimes we do interest only. If we do interest and principal payments, usually the borrower is looking at a 25-year amortization or a 40-year amortization. So they are putting money back into the housing trust fund that we can recycle out into new projects. But this is really where we get to manipulation of funding sources, and they need that cheap money to make it cash flow. The cash flows on most of these affordable housing units are so minimal. If they have a catastrophic event, they likely will not have enough cash in the bank to pay the mortgage deductible or the insurance deductible, so they will not rebuild the project, which is another unfortunate situation we have based upon what our expenses and costs are today. TIF, tax increment financing. Huge hot topic word, I know, in our state right now. We had a huge blow up in the community in which I live, Rapid City, over the largest proposed TIF in the state of South Dakota. So we can talk TIFs all day. What I would say, at the highest level, we have very few economic development tools in the state of South Dakota. A TIF is one that is legal under state statute, okay? Can do a TIF for 3 reasons: industrial development, economic development, and affordable housing. Those are the 3 allowed under state statute. The problem that we get into sometimes is get a little loose on what a project actually is or is not. Most of the time, where we support projects with TIF funding is when they go after an affordable housing TIF. What a lot of people don't know is if you go for the affordable housing TIF, you are required to meet housing costs for those at 80% AMI or lower. If you give them the economic development TIF, they are not required to do that. So they may tell you the housing is going to be affordable, but there is no legal recourse to make sure that it is, okay? So if you're ever talking TIFs, the best thing I can advise on is please be as educated as possible, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of confusion, a lot of anger. They are a good development tool. We do support them in projects as long as they're done correctly. You're going to see DDF, mentioned that a couple slides ago, deferred developer fee. Sometimes to get the numbers to work out, the developer has to wait to take their money out of the project until the future and when the cash flows stabilize. So that is also a mechanism to deal with inputs and costs. South Dakota Housing Authority does a great job of balancing that as a tool to make the numbers work, but not getting overly aggressive. So there's a maximum that you can defer, and usually that's percentage of project cost. Permanent mortgage, when you see that on here, is traditional lending sources. Same kind of concept. We usually term it that way because when you have a traditional lending source, usually they're going to take a first position primary mortgage. Tax credit equity, low-income housing tax credits, both programs run by the state of South Dakota Housing Authority. There are 2 actual levels of that, 9% and 4%, different ways to apply, different pots of money, different ways they get funded, but they're both opportunities to leverage tax credits to get projects built. Amy covered these as well. We have HTF, Housing Trust Fund, Home Fund, and HOF. So since we dived into those, won't do anything other than mention the acronyms again. This is another one that a lot of people overlook as an opportunity in the state of South Dakota is CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. If you are unaware, the way that works in South Dakota, there are 2 communities, Rapid City and Sioux Falls, that run their own Community Development Block Grant programs. The rest of the state is divided up into regions, so there are pots of money always available for your region that you can go after to help finance some of this stuff. There are restrictions, very similar to what Amy was talking about earlier on the Housing Infrastructure Financing Program, where it has to go into public infrastructure, can't actually use the cash to build the units, but it does help you cover a lot of the base costs when you're dealing with the development. Housing Infrastructure Financing Program again, Amy mentioned that. Owner equity, cash infusion by the end owner. So these bottom 2 are tools we use at the foundation. They're not commonly used in the state of South Dakota. I wish they were more frequently. I think it was Lori mentioned, what does your city and county have available for resources? And if it's not dollars, they usually have property, okay? So how do we leverage that property, which may not only be a great place to put housing based on its location in the community, but usually it's low cost, and it's also costing that community overhead to maintain it and keep it. It's also not generating any real estate taxes. So there's some really good leverage there in trying to get properties that are owned by somebody else at a discount or for free, which obviously drops your overall cost. So land banking fund, we have a program at the foundation. In addition to lending money, we actually have a pot of money where we go and buy property. So we have a real estate portfolio. Do a lot of due diligence on zoning, try to really focus on infill, make sure that we're not adding additional costs to the communities when they are then having to deal with either putting in or supporting infrastructure over time. And this is another great way if you work with a nonprofit partner, that folks can get tax deductions. Again, right where accountants come in, if you have a local nonprofit to partner with, they can donate to the nonprofit can help with the project, they get a tax deduction. People seem to like that a lot, so it's a program we use frequently. All right, so we're gonna go into capital stacks. So my first capital stack slide, very pretty, very simple. This is the reality of what capital stacks look like in projects. Every one of these projects up here is either being built today or is in the process of being financed. So they are actual real world projects. They go everywhere in size from this Sagebrush Flats, 180 unit property in Rapid City that costs $40 million, to Stone Ridge Commons. This is going to be a project in Spearfish, South Dakota, 92 units, $20 million. These three in the middle are 30 to 40 unit projects. So depending on your size, especially for a Watertown, this may be a great size project to work on. But you'll notice every single one of these, and these colors are to scale based upon funding source, and every color is a different funding source. So you notice here in the radiant in the middle, we have 6, 7 different funding sources to build one building. So figuring out how to massage those different programs and get them to be able to stack on top of each other so you can get the project built is what I mean when I say it gets really difficult and really complex. The good part is, like I said, these are real world projects. These have been built or are being built right now. So if you have questions and you're like, ooh, that's the size my community wants, please contact me. I will either help you or I will get you to the person who did these projects so that they can help you understand what this looks like. So these are larger multifamily projects that we are in as a foundation currently. These are smaller multifamily and a single family, actually 2 single family projects. I knew coming to this conference that there was likely to be people from very different size communities, and I wanted to make sure we had different things that might be applicable to your community that you could take home to think about and talk about. I also, after this slide, have pulled out 3 individual projects so we can talk a lot deeper about those, as long as I don't go over time. Seem to be doing okay so far. Okay, so these ones, smaller, great projects. One of the other things that I have learned is there are a lot of cross applications for buildings. This Chief Drive housing project right here is owned and being constructed by Black Hills Works. If you're not familiar with Black Hills Works, they're an entity that serves folks in the Black Hills region that have mental and physical disabilities and handicaps. So this project is actually 8 units with a lot of co-living opportunities like common rooms, kitchens, those kinds of things, but each unit has its own bedroom, bathroom, and sink, minimal amenities. However, when I look at this project, and we've now talked about it with several other communities, is people coming out of college that want a smaller space. They may be single, or folks that may be trying to downsize, want something smaller, but still want community opportunities where they live. This is a great project and idea concept for both of those categories of folks who may be looking for something, again, significantly different than what we have been touting as the solution for housing in our country. The other great thing about this project, to leverage technology today and make sure that the people served that live in that unit, so they don't have to physically have a person on staff all the time in the location. There is a massive amount of technology in that where they can do face-to-face medical appointments. They can do face-to-face interviews. They can do face-to-face time with their caseworker virtually and not having to send people on site all the time and incurring that cost. Custer Cares, this is a very similar concept, 7 units. Both of these projects are running right around $2 million. I'll let you know today when we talk about how expensive stuff is. If you see a project where the number per unit cost is significantly higher or lower than $250,000, something is wrong. Because that is generally where these things are going to land on cost per unit. So just want to give you that kind of as a guardrail. If you see somebody and they're like, oh, well, I can build this for $100,000, I'd be very careful about that. If it's going to cost you $300,000, why? Okay, let's look at that top end, number 2. Earlier, Governor's Home Project. These are phenomenal. We partner with a organization called NeighborWorks Dakota Home Resources, which is actually a family organization to Lori's organization, Grow South Dakota. And today, they are taking lots in Belle Fourche, South Dakota, and prepping them, dropping a governor's home on them, and selling them for about $267,000. So even with the higher cost of infrastructure and blowing stuff up and digging in the rock in the Black Hills, they're still hitting a price point that is significantly under that $410,000 that South Dakota Housing was saying is kind of the average house price. Last one, Custer Community Housing. I'll talk a little bit about this, but it's actually part of my presentation on the next panel. The city of Custer has been very aggressive in trying to address their affordability of housing. To the extent where they have said in a meeting, we're giving you this property. Do whatever you want with it. That led to some interesting conversations, but we are actually working to break that parcel up into 6 different lots, do 6 different housing units on that, and we've actually got the price compressed down to about $1.2 million for the project, so about $200,000 per house, per unit. So again, these things, every color to scale, are taking this many different inputs to make it go. And that's before we get to the minutia. So this is just, here's what we think it's gonna cost, what do we need for capital? So now we're gonna dig into 3 of these projects a little bit deeper, so you can see actually up close what they look like. Too far. When I had the slide beg, borrow, and steal ideas, also not original. Amy's presentation, 41 flats in Sioux Falls. The developers in the state also beg, borrow, and steal from each other. This is Rapid City's 41 flats. It's almost an identical building, has the same 41 units in it, costs almost the same amount of money. The one in, I believe, Sioux Falls that Amy put up was $9.1 million. This one was closer to 10 based upon real estate costs in Rapid City, but functionally the same project. Also uses functionally the same capital stack. So again, this is a great way to do this. They applied for South Dakota Housing in Home, Housing Trust Fund, and tax credit equity, just like Amy talked about. You can stack those. They got a permanent mortgage against the property. I believe Amy said the city of Sioux Falls gave them a loan to get that across the line. In this case, we gave them the loan. Our loan in this project is $1.25 million out of a $10 million project. This is, again, 41 units, anywhere from 1 to 3 bedrooms, and this is all to scale. So this is exactly how it got paid for. So about $5 million in the tax credit equity, $1,600,000 permanent mortgage, and then our 1.25. But again, like I said, $10 million project, 41 units. Units cost right around $250,000 pop. So Chief Drive Housing talked about this, and this is that 8 unit with the cohabitating spaces in it. Again, Black Hills Works owns this. Black Hills Works decided to take the tack that they're the owner, they're the developer, they subbed out the generals, all that kind of stuff. So in this project, you see a significantly larger chunk of owner equity than a lot of these other projects, but that's by design. They also have a nonprofit foundation attached to Black Hills Works, so they are able to do the things that I talked about, getting in the donations of funding, getting in the donations of property, providing the prior owner with some tax deductions, and then flipping that leverage into the capital for the project. The other reason I pulled this one is this. Talked about community development block grants. Incredibly underutilized tool. I very strongly suggest that anybody that wants to do housing, on top of looking at state programs, do your research and find out who your rep is for your community development block grant for your region, because they're generally accessible pots of money. And those, as long as federal government's doing their jobs, get re-upped and refilled every year. So this is another photo of the governor's home, just in a different direction. If you don't know, and I'll give them another pitch on this, you can line the governor's home up different directions depending on how big and wide the lot is or is not. You know, Amy showed a picture of one with a breezeway and a garage attached to it. In our area of South Dakota, our property costs are significantly higher. Our cheapest lot I can buy today in basically the Black Hills is in Belfouche, and it costs $42,000 to $46,000. So we, much as I would love people to have, you know, full basements, garages, all those things, sometimes the offset is you don't get those because we had to use that money for the real estate. But you get a well-built quality home. I know there was another question too about compressing timelines on governor's homes. So work with an organization that does regular delivery of governor's homes. And Mike, please yell at me if I say this the wrong way. But you can get 2 per quarter per developer. Is that correct?
We've actually changed that, so it's 2 per month.
Okay, 2 per month. So you're not locked into that 12 to 18 month timeline. You can contract with these folks as long as you're doing your down payments and you're a good end user and you're doing the right things with the program, you can stagger those a lot faster. So that 12 to 18 month timeline is not as restrictive as it sounds at first blush. This one also, we have land banking funded. We have not done this with HOF yet. Mostly we've done it with owner equity and strategic housing trust fund money. But what we're doing, again, to compress the inputs, is we're using our funding at the foundation to buy these $40,000 to $50,000 lots, and we're carrying them through the construction process until the home is sold, and that's when we get paid back. If you think about it, and this is a $250,000 all-in cost build, $40,000 to $50,000 is 20 to 25% of the entire project cost. If we can take that off the developer and hold that risk and that monetary input until it gets sold and then we get paid back, they can build these a lot faster. Because for every 4 or 5 houses, they can do a complete entire another home because they don't have the real estate input costs. So again, how do you massage the inputs? What can you do? How do you manipulate those things? And what are different ways you can chip away at the overall cost? So these are projects we've done with these kinds of financing and we are doing currently. This next slide is ideas that we use in the shop to try to entice other things to happen in our communities. Some of these we've tried and have worked. Some of them we've tried and haven't worked. Some of them we haven't actually had the opportunity to try it. But they're all good ideas on how to do and get additional funding. Let's be up. Thanks, Mike. Again, we talked about South Dakota housing programs. We had USDA up here talking about this. Community Development Block Grant. Donations to and from nonprofit orgs. These can be very simple grants. They can be very complex. There's a legal structure called a PRI, where a community foundation or any foundation can actually loan out assets under management to projects. TIFs, talked about those. City funding, a lot of cities cash strapped. Some cities, surprisingly not. A lot of times, and we found a community that had a partial penny tax that they didn't repeal, and so it was just going into a pot that they weren't using, and we were able to get almost $400,000 from the city. City, county, school district property, again, a lot of those drain on local resources if they're just sitting there empty. Yigby, we are in the process of trying to buy property from 2 different churches in the Black Hills right now. Prior to the pandemic, a lot of religious institutions felt we're just going to keep growing, we're going to need bigger facilities, we're going to need this land long term. Pandemic happens, people stop going to church in person, numbers drop, tune in online, not using all this parking space, not going to have to build a bigger church. What does that look like? Can we buy that from them and put housing on it? A lot of them have missions where that is very well aligned with our affordable housing, and they say, you know what, we'll give this to you cheap or free if you put affordable housing on it, because at least it's doing something positive for the community. Local businesses, equity buy-ins from local businesses are a good way, especially if you have a lot of pillar businesses in your community, and most of them need housing, especially if they want to expand. So getting some money out of them sometimes is the way to go. City county fee waivers. This and 12 really line up well together, and I love talking about projects like this because it really goes to show how outside the box you can think. Everybody in here has a fire department. If you get a property where a house should be built and there is a blighted parcel on it and is combustible, and you get it, donate it to the fire department for a training exercise, let them burn it down, then you go to the city or county who owns the dump and you say, we want you to waive all of your dump fees. You can save tens of thousands of dollars destroying bad structures that way. Real estate tax abatements, we have South Dakota codified laws that require counties to give real estate tax abatements for certain types of affordable housing entities. So look at that one too. Because again, depending on your parcel and where you're at, that can, and how long it takes you, that can save you tens of thousands of dollars as well. I took up a lot of time, I apologize. We're real close to time. I think they gave me some leeway. Questions? And again, if I can't get to you today, please reach out to me. We'll get back to you. We'll do a virtual meeting, email, whatever is the best format for you.
I'll just yell it out. How about that? You talk about your housing trust fund. Talk a little bit about how you came up with the money to put into that fund that you now use to do all your stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So our original capitalization in our Strategic Housing Trust Fund in Rapid City was $10 million. Going back to taxes that people are underutilizing and partial penny taxes. For a long time, Rapid City was doing a partial penny tax to build our monument or the Rapid City Civic Center. Instead of repealing that tax, what the community decided to do was create what they call the Vision Fund. So that tax money now flows into the Vision Fund. The Vision Fund takes applications, they take their money, fund different applications based upon community input and a committee board that they have set up of elected officials and community members. We also have a private funder foundation called JTVF, John T. Vukurovich Foundation. They are one of the leaders in leveraging their financing. They really wanted us to be able to be funded to do this, so they actually challenged the city with our application and said, we'll give them $5 million, but you have to give them $5 million. When that happened, it kind of started a chain reaction. Another private foundation threw in a couple $1 million. We went to a regional foundation. They were like, we just want to see how this works, and we want to see if you can do it. So pilot programs are huge, especially when you get to nonprofit funding foundations. They gave us $3 million. We had some private donors that kicked in money. When we went to our land banking concept, we didn't even actually have to pitch it. We found a funder at an event that had heard about our gap financing and said, what else can you do? And we said, well, we want to try land banking. And they're like, here you go. We'd love to see what you guys can do. So with all of that success and with some political changes that have been going on, Ellsworth Air Force Base is getting way bigger. The Department of Defense has said they are no longer interested in being responsible for housing for our men and women in the military. We then went to our congressional delegation and the senators Rounds and Thune and said, you know, we're happy to try to help the private market deal with the housing shortage that's going to come from the base expansion, but we need money. They said, how much? Gave them a number. They said, how about we give you $30 million? And we're like, that would be fabulous. That has a lot of strings attached to it because of the federal processes involved, but that will give us capital over the next 6-7 years to hopefully build at a minimum 1,500 units. But as was noted by Lori earlier, in the Black Hills, we're short about 10,000 right now, so we're still way undershooting that number.
All right, thank you, Greg. I think we're gonna move on to our next panel. We are gonna have more time for questions.
Thank you.
We are going to have some more time for questions after the panel, which he is also going to be on. So if you do have more questions, feel free to ask them after that. So, perfect. All right.
I killed this because I turned it off.
That works. So. All right. Our next few panelists, they revolve around creative development. We've got Randy Hansen, president of Mills Construction. Randy was born and raised in South Dakota. He is a Redfield High graduate and has 2 engineering degrees from SDSU and Brookings. He spent 9 years as an aerospace engineer in Fullerton, California, before returning to pursue the 2nd degree. Currently lives and works in Brookings at Mills Construction, where he has served as owner and president for the past 22 years. We also have Greg Lighton again, whose experience in both nonprofit and private sector housing developments provides a vital perspective for today's conversation. And then we also have Levi Teslaw. He is the Director of Investor Relations at Mailbox Money, a multifamily development firm focused on solving the affordable housing crisis through modern workforce housing. In his role, he works closely with investors to ensure they feel informed, confident, and aligned with the company's mission of building scalable, wellness-designed communities. Each speaker is going to have about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll dive into questions. Can I have the speakers join us on stage?
I apologize if it's disappointing that it's still me, but it's still me. I will try to talk much faster this time and leave lots of time for questions. So we were now asked to talk about creative development projects, and I mentioned earlier one of our Custer housing projects that we're working on right now, so a big shout out to our neighbors to the south in Custer. Like I said, they are incredibly aggressive about trying to address their affordable housing issues in Custer, to the extent that they have come to us with 3 different parcels and asked us what we could do with them. This is our first question we talk to every time we're trying to figure out how much people care about housing affordability in their community and how creative we can get is, does your community truly want affordable housing? A lot of talk about it. There are also places where they specifically continue to put in zoning codes and ordinances to basically make it so you cannot create affordable housing in their community. So until you know this, I would not spend a lot of time trying to fix a community's problems. Hopefully you don't run into this. Custer, again, very aggressive, want to help, gave us parcel opportunities, and we may actually develop all 3 of them. I always like this, real estate, 3 most important things in real estate: location, location, location. The city of Custer owns these 2 parcels on this plat map, known as Chapinski Tract 1 and 2. They abut actually the creek that runs through Custer up here, so a beautiful piece of property. They want to sell us to a developer. They could probably get at least $1 million for it. But their concern is really about affordability and how do we increase housing stock in Custer. So today, along this public alley, they already have housing along this entire southern edge here. So when we looked at this, we would really like to keep this top part by the creek green space, but also keep with the view of the neighborhood and the structure of it. So we asked them, what if we just plat off 6 lots directly across here, and we can put a variety of homes on these 6 lots that will all meet affordability requirements. So very excited about that. Then we got kind of an interesting wrinkle from the high school. So talked earlier about workforce development was mentioned, and also potential things that high schools are doing. Custer High School recently got a several $million-dollar grant from the federal government to expand their technological education programs, and they built a huge shop. Along with that, they want to start building modular homes. And they said, okay, will you guys put these 6 lots, subdivide that up? Can we have some? We're like, this would be great, okay?
Other amazing thing about this, and it goes back to the location, the high school is right here. If we need to move the modular from the shop that they build it in, it's about 300 yards. So immediate delivery. The other thing that we're super excited about is we're partnering as the foundation with the school district to get them how to basically educate them and get them in the right room so they can raise the funding for the program. So none of the materials or hopefully the staff salaries will have to be borne by the school district. That will actually all be private donation money. One other thing that we thought would be amazing, and I graduated from high school in South Dakota in 1999, so 26 years ago. Ooh, makes me feel really old. Anyway, what happens, and I did this in high school, we built a modular at the high school I went to. What if you can come back home and look down the street and you can say, I built that house. When I was in high school here, great connections to the community and the community roots, and say, not only did I learn a lot in high school, but I built something that's still in the community today. So this is kind of our proposed project here. We often also in our office talk about community character, neighborhoods, diversity, what all those things look like. So what we'll probably do on these 6 lots is do 1 or 2 of each one of these options here. And actually this CTE modular, I stole this off the internet. I didn't know this program existed before I came to present here. This was built by the Sioux Falls High Schools and actually went up for auction. So if you're a community that's looking for diversity of housing and you want a pre-built modular, start doing some research on what high schools are building and how they are sold. So again, we're looking at Custer High School. They think they can deliver a unit every year to 18 months. Governor's Homes, again, very, very affordable, reasonable, well-built option. And then we are also working with a third-party vendor modular constructor directly, so without sales in between, and really dialing in what does it cost for delivery to our different communities. And they actually build modulars that are 2 stories. So we can get several different character types on those 6 lots. Talk a lot about capital stacks. This is really diving into it, but showed this in my last presentation. So Custer as a community said, we will give you this property, but we need to do X, Y, and Z first. Part of it is they're required to put infrastructure in. So we said, how about we take a step back and figure out a way we can buy this property from you as a community. You can then turn around and take that and cover some of your infrastructure expenses. Makes them really happy, right? They're like, hey, less checks we have to write. Let's see if we can figure that out. So this is where this top part is coming in. Real estate donation, so part of that value will be paid for, part of it will be donated from the community. Looking at potentially applying for HOF funds like Amy talked about. And then we have our layering of our strategic housing trust funds right there. And then developer equity is dollars that the community is gonna put in as well. One of the things we really try hard to do, and we're not against grants to organizations, we understand sometimes that's the only way things can get accomplished, is revolving our money so that we can keep sticking in projects time after time after time. So this developer equity, after this first sale of the first couple of houses, will likely leave the capital stack because we won't need it anymore. So 6 units, about 1.1 is pretty conservative numbers, might get up to 1.2. And then here's the cost, just in case you're curious. So because I knew it happens every year, tried to be smart with my math and look at the increase in the governor's homes costs year over year. So it's like $200,000 here, even though they're at about 96 this year. We think that the high school can get a modular built at about 80,000 and be a little smaller footprint, but we don't feel like there's any issues with that, and probably a good thing. Gives some variety again in the neighborhood and allows different people at different price points. Our third-party mods that we're looking at are coming in at about $175,000, and then there's our land and our infrastructure costs. So that's exactly how we get to this. There are, a multitude of different ways and different products you could put on these parcels. We may not end up with the 6 lots. They may not be configured that way, but this is the kind of creative development, especially if you start scaling it, is able to get you these lower price points and more affordable homes. One of the other great things that happened in this CTE mod program is we met with the school board and the community to talk about funding for this program. We actually had one of the community leaders who also is a business owner, like I talked about earlier, owns an HVAC company. He said, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna donate the HVAC systems for the 2 CTE modular homes, and I'm gonna show up and teach the high school kids how to put them in, okay? So, not a lot of out-of-pocket costs for that individual, but huge community impact, and that'll probably shave $17,000 off of each of these houses. So when you start looking at those little inputs and how much difference you can make if you just can get 2 or 3 things changed and those costs compressed, you can make this number look a lot more palatable. Then we can turn around and put those units into the community at a way lower price point. You know, whether that's the property, some of the costs going in, you know, maybe you have local builders, First Source or some company, maybe it's a Menards that's willing to donate some of the materials for the project. There's a lot of ways that you can start eating into these costs, and I would encourage you to look at all of those and try to get creative from that perspective so that we can get homes at more reasonable prices for our communities. That's what I got on that.
Okay. Good morning, and the first thing I want to do is thank you for allowing me to come here today. Because I'm a speaker, I got a free pass, and I always take more away from these than I give. So I want to start by just showing some appreciation for the team that was utilized in this project, because it's more than just the developer, more than the designer, it's a team. And so in no particular order, but I don't want to miss anybody, there's South Dakota Housing Development Authority, you know, Mike with the homes, and Amy and her team, and Bridget. I didn't see Bridget here, but they were key. Without them, this would have never happened. And then, and their team. And then Linda Pierce with Lily Design is in the audience. She was our designer for this project and really helped us come up with the layout and the crawl space and how this all works. And City of Aurora, the mayor, the city council, and the staff, more about that later. And then Mills Property Management, they're here, they have a booth. Mallory Minor's here, Melissa Elijah's here, right here. They were key and are continuing to be key because they're our manager for this project going forward. So with that, if I missed anybody, I am so sorry. There's a lot of people that you have billed as part of your team. Subcontractors, that's what I missed. Many came from the town that this was built in and or the surrounding community. So it provided jobs very locally to where the project was built. Okay, so I have the clicker, the power of the clicker, all right. This is Oak Village, and we're gonna come back to this slide because this was the original concept and it changed for good reasons. Lori, help.
I didn't touch it last.
Oh, well, I don't know what I did.
It's that arrow to the right.
Yeah, I'm doing the arrow, but does the red thing work? Yeah, well, the point works. Sorry, I don't know. Angie.
I teach this. Oh, it's on. Oh, the battery's dead.
Battery's dead.
Okay.
I'll manually.
Here, I'll
turn
click
it.
for you.
Oh. Oh, yeah. Oh, I can do that.
Yeah, we
So
can
what
do
am I
that.
doing?
So
Oh,
you
I need
just,
those
you
numbers,
just
but-
click on it,
Okay,
and then you can go back and forward.
okay. While you race for batteries?
Yeah, I'm gonna go get some batteries here. I'll just-
Why me?
Oh, sorry, you probably need to.
Okay. Well, we'll improvise. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, Oak Village in Aurora. Here we go. All right, project overview. We call it a twin home project, and it's located in Aurora, which has a population of about 1,200 people. If you're not familiar with Aurora, it's straight east of Brookings. And there's not a lot of retail in Aurora, so people commute from there to go to Brookings to work. And the school district, Aurora School District, is actually Brookings. So it says 4 twin homes, but it's 8 Dakotaplexes connected by double-car garages to then create the 4 twin homes. We named it Oak Village, and our target market was affordable workforce housing. Developers are Randy, which is me, my wife Stacy, and we were mentoring a couple that was a part of this original concept. Younger couple is trying to bring in, and for various reasons, they needed us to buy them out. So we bought them out, and my 87-year-old mother said, I want in on this. So she put in some cash. I'm the managing member, but she tells me what to do. So we organized by Plex Properties LLC. Anybody doing this sort of thing, you'll be advised to create an LLC. All right, so here's the site plan and by Linda. And so it shows what we did and how we laid it out. More on the land, more on our private street to come. There's what it looked like after we were done making changes as far as like artist rendering and how it flowed. So I want to point out the difference now. You see how this is more curved and offset? South Dakota Housing, and I believe it was you, Mike, said, you know what, we like your design, it looks cool, but windows look directly across from each other. Never thought of that, right? So you're up there washing dishes, you look up, there's your neighbor washing dishes, and you're like, awkward, so you turn the blinds, or worse yet, you're in the bedroom or bathroom. So they were directly across in some of these designs, so we took Mike's advice. I'm giving you credit, Mike, I hope you're the one. Oh, it was you, okay. And we offset them, see? Okay. Here's an actual picture of a Dakotaplex. They're different than Governor's House in design. Same peeps build them. And by the way, I have a Governor's House that I was involved in that my youngest son, Riley Hansen, is a youth pastor in Mitchell, South Dakota for River Tree Church. So he meets all the income requirements, starving youth pastor. He had no assets. And he's living in a Governor's House now that Linda helped design the garage and made it look cooler than just normal. And he's married, and they're loving their house. So that was just a sidebar. There's Oak Village. Project overview. We got 8 of the 3-bedroom, 2-bath Dakotaplexes, 4 right-hand, 4 left-hand. There are 2-bedroom units, but I don't know why you would ever do that. The cost difference is not a lot, and unless your lot is really small, then I could see why you get 2-bedroom. So we got the 3-bedroom. They're 994 square feet of living space, and we put a usable crawl space under them, which if you're going to do crawl space, it has to be 4 foot, but it's insulated. We have access to it, so you can put your Christmas, decorations down there, that sort of thing, usable. We didn't go with the basements, which you can, for a couple of reasons. 3, it wouldn't make it affordable anymore, and there's an argon issue, which you have to pass argon tests, and there was water table issues. So crawl space made the most sense. And we put double car garages on each of them, 522 square feet. And then we put a concrete patio with privacy fence in the back of the garage for grilling space, that sort of thing. Okay, there's the actual floor plan. It's hard to see, I know. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, right-hand, left-hand, garages between them. The wall is secure between them. It's got sound insulation. See the concrete patios in the back. Here's some photos that I thought you might find interesting. And so, I don't have my red marker. The closet way off the right door, off the entry door, that's where your HVAC unit is. It's all electric. Stackable washer dryer and hot water heat. Carpeted bedrooms. Just gives you an idea if you've never seen the inside of these. There's the kitchen layout. And there's a garage, unfinished. Most of these photos were not quite finished because we had people moving in as soon as the concrete was poured. In fact, we had to walk furniture into the units because I said, no driving on this fresh concrete. More on that later. Very popular. Operations. Right at the get-go, we were talking to Mills Property Management to ask them, what do you think rents would bring in Aurora if I do this conceptual project? So started with Lily, got some concepts, went to Mills Property, helped me, what's my cost gonna be? They helped build a pro forma, and then they marketed, and we must, Dakota Plexes, the rule is you have to have them be affordable rental units for 10 years. After 10 years, you can decide to sell them individually. You can sell them as, in our case, twin homes, or I could sell the whole complex as a multifamily unit. So there's some options there. Rent is at $12.75 a month, and the tenant pays utilities, which is approximately $278 a month. We got those numbers from the city of Aurora. They helped us build this. So we had to be below $15.97 to start with. Each year, South Dakota Housing looks at that. They decide what the new rent's gonna be. We make our tenants sign a year lease, and then when the year renewal comes up, we'll see what South Dakota Housing is saying, we'll see what the market is bearing, and we're able to adjust. And let's see. Landlord pays for snow removal, lawn care, land taxes, land and structure insurance, and property management and maintenance. So there's no HOA or anything like that. So the tenants pay their rent, they pay their utilities, that's it. And we allow pets. If you're gonna own a property like this, in this day and age, allow the pets. Stacy and I are dog lovers anyway, but I would advise you this way. And that pet rent isn't part of what you can charge. That doesn't decrease what you can charge for rent, okay? So it's just bonus money. Go with the DNA, because those little piles of unforeseens, people really clean up when they know that all you have to do is take a sample, it's their dog, they have to pay. So, pets. Popularity, all 8 of these houses were rented prior to being finished. And so shout out from Mills Property, the fact that affordable housing is needed. And what's interesting is the mix, right? So like we have 6 young couples, 2 singles are renting 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses. So there's a mix. In my other property in White, that tends to be more elderly, but there's also a mix there too. And it's not like this. That's a different program through USDA, and they're awesome. Finances. So the land was $158,000, $10,000 less than asking. So Al Kurtenbach of Daktronics fame bought some land, and he loves developing on the east side of Brookings. So he made lots. And because we were buying 2 to put this together, we offered him less. He said, sure. So that's what the land cost was. It's 44,800 square feet, which is just a little over an acre to do this complex. And the house structures for us at that time was $707,000 for the 8 3-bedrooms. The contractor cost was $720,000, almost $721,000. That included, of course, the site work, the utilities, crawl spaces, garages, driveways, you know, everything that you put the houses on and build this community. And we built our own street. And so miscellaneous costs there. So total project cost was $1,615,000. When you look at that as the cost per square foot of the usable square foot, it's right at that $203 a square foot, or $200,000 a unit. So in today's terms, it's affordable. The financing is to the right. We heard from Greg about stacked financing. We only had 3, the CHDP, HOF, and cash from the developers to make that total. Lessons learned. It's a very affordable project in today's environment. I own a construction company. We can't build those homes for that. We can't. So houses are well built. We have to check on argon. Remember that. That was a lesson learned. I didn't know that going into it. They include all the utilities except microwaves. We have to supply blinds, shower curtain rods, toilet plungers, and landing stairs, right, and patios, because they come and you decide on your site how to get in. South Dakota housing requirements for houses. Well, another arm of them is Mike, who builds them, so they qualify. That's important to know. So the South Dakota housing has qualifications. These homes meet those qualifications. They move them onto your site. It's a credible thing to see. It's up to us to hook them all up. Unfortunately, there's a serious backlog. I've talked to Mike recently. You've heard about it. We've talked about the backlog. And then always check your covenants and restrictions. So what Greg said earlier, I call attitude. So the first thing I did when I thought of this concept was I went to Aurora and I said, what do you think about this? If they have an attitude, not in my backyard, or cave people, citizens against virtually everything, we say, thank you very much, I'll go to Elton, or whatever, right? And so they were very welcoming and said, yeah, God's backyard. I like that acronym. I wrote it down. And so that's important. But then also your zoning, right? You have to have the proper zoning. So you check on that. And that all fit here, of course. So we bought the land. Wow. Thank you. Questions will come later.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If you're looking in your agenda, you'll probably notice that my name is not included in there. I was kind of a last-minute addition, and I'd like to thank the Watertown Development Company for allowing us to come and talk about what we do here at Mailbox Money. We titled this Creative Development Through Simplicity. I'm not a smart man, don't claim to be. I know that I'm staying between all you folks in the lunch, so I'll try to keep this fun and short for you. I better speak on Mailbox Money. We're out of Brookings. We are apartment complex developers, and we focus on modern workforce housing. Most developers like to go one of two directions when developing, and each one has its time and place, but each comes with its own challenges. First, you got Section 8 housing. That comes with a lot of red tape, slows down projects, and there is just a lot of obstacles to overcome when doing Section 8 housing. The next is luxury housing. We saw a lot of this come in Class A, high-end luxury during 2021 when money was cheap. They could get away with the cost of all the amenities added in, and as we know today, money is not as cheap and costs are going nowhere but up. Here's where our creative process comes in. We made the decision to do copy and paste modeling. So we got two different building types that you can see up here. We have our 14-plex units and our 25-plex units. We just, same footprint on every project. We copy and paste, and we'll just change the layout or the amount of units we're building depending on the project size, land density requirements. All the units are pretty much identical. If you go into one of our units at one location, you'll see the same things at the next. So we like to keep it simple. It helps us get faster approvals and helps us control our costs on all of our projects. Here's the things that we're not doing on our projects that we believe just increase the cost and increases costs on projects, which decreases affordability for tenants. So you see here, we do all surface level parking, no underground. There's no clubhouses or pools. There's no elevators, and there's no expensive add-ons. Like I said, back in 2021, people were thinking that amenities would attract tenants, and today we're seeing it's quite the opposite. A lot of those amenities aren't being used. They are adding extra operational costs, and quite frankly, they add complaints to the property. You know, if a golf simulator at your project is down, people don't tend to like that. If you don't have a golf simulator at your apartment complex, they can't complain about it. We are just three-story buildings on these 14 unit complexes. It's one entrance with a couple of different, on the first floor, they have just a couple different units that are only accessed from the exterior. And then when you walk in these units, you have a tight corridor, minimum hallway spaces in there, so that we really maximize our rentable space. Yeah, here's kind of touching on here what we're doing. It's wellness design. You can see we have very large windows in our projects that let in a lot of natural light, makes the tenant feel good where they live. We use very quiet layouts, very simple. We found that most tenants aren't even using dining rooms anymore, so we give them kitchen islands that they just pull into and save on space there. Everything's very durable. The windows are from Pella, impact resistant. It's kind of hard to tell in the picture, but it looks like a flat roof, but it is actually just slightly sloped, fully adhered, which might have a higher upfront cost, but lowers our overall operational costs. Oh, and I better hit on our walkable outdoor space. So we call all these our reserve units because we look for places to build around large green spaces that we don't own, we don't have to maintain, but our tenants are able to take full use of. Just hitting again on what predictability builds. Since we are doing these copy and paste over and over again, we find it is much easier to underwrite. When you take our plans to an engineer, basically they are rubber stamping them because they are familiar with the project and they are able to easily just realize, oh, drop this building here, boop, looks good, on to the next. This also helps our subcontractors. A lot of them are very familiar with our project, and with familiarity comes better efficiency, and then overall lower execution risks on our projects. The fact that we pretty much have down exactly what we're gonna cost on these, we rarely run into our contingencies, and if we do, it's a very small amount. Here's kind of our timeline. So you can see here, we go with a phased approach. So when we start, from the time we break ground on our first building, we're usually getting tenants in there about 9 months later. And all we'll do is while that first building's finished up is, well, even before that, with contractors coming in, we avoid the bottleneck. So, you know, your concrete guys come in, get your foundations poured, they're on to the next. Then your framers come in, and then so on and so forth for finishing off. Then once the building is ready to rent out to tenants, we will just move our construction fence back over, get occupancy in that first building, get renters in there and start making income instead of having to wait for, you know, a lot of 100 and some units to rent all at once. We're able to get 14 in there at a time, and that allows us to pre-lease up. Yeah, and then after, it's about 1 to 2 months, so we're just right on to the next one. As far as our profitability window, we look to do after two and a half years with all the value that we've built up, we look to do a refinance on our projects, capture that value, make our partners, get them their capital back, and still maintain ownership and then hold on for a longer period. We typically target sale at 5 to 10 years. Once you get towards that 10 years, you start to see operational costs increase, so that's kind of when we're looking to do our exit. Here's just a kind of picture to show what we are doing and how consistent we are with this copy and paste model. Everything you see up here is basically the same building, except for these two, the blue on Lorraine and the belt heist. Again, that's when money was a little bit cheaper. We built the high-end luxury, and then we saw just how much more operational costs were versus what you could really be charging for rent to maintain a high occupancy. We underwrite all our projects right around 93% occupant, 90 to 93% occupancy. We're seeing on pretty much everything in these reserve models that we are consistently at a 90%, 96% occupancy on them. Just for instance, right now, Foss Fields down here is under construction. That is going on in Sioux Falls. It's a 100-unit complex spread between 4 buildings of 25 units apiece. And it's probably a little hard to read there, but it is about a $16.5 million project. So we're running about $165,000 per unit cost on our projects. Versus a typical, apartment build, you're running into the 180, 190 when you're looking at these modern workforce buildings. This is our contact information. If you guys have any questions about how we're accomplishing this or are looking to partner with us, we're always looking for connections, whether that be in the finance, contracting, or if you're interested in becoming an investor, we'd love to connect with you. Thanks, guys.
I think Angie's.
I think Andy just stepped out for a second. So thank you so much for a great presentation and the success that you have all had here in the organizations. Much appreciated. So let's open this up now for questions and discussion here. So who would like to ask questions of this panel? Okay.
I can yell.
You can yell. All right, let's try it.
So it would be for Greg and for Levi, the last two, garages, or maybe putting all of them. So affordable housing, even your governor homes, how important is it to have garages? Because that is an added expense to getting your family off the street or out of a crowded 2-bedroom into a 4-bedroom house. How important is the garage?
I can take it first from our side of things. I'm actually glad you brought that up. You probably noticed in the pictures on our sites that we don't have garages because, as you mentioned, it is a additional cost that we have found a lot of people are opting out of. So instead of having that forced cost in there, in decreasing affordability, we decided that we would not do garages and just all surface level parking, and we still are maintaining high occupancy. We're not seeing the need for it in the multifamily world, at least.
Yeah, and I'll just go this way. The reason we went with garages is because it's a different product, and ultimately we want it to be affordable housing for people to purchase. And so having that double car garage connected was important for us.
We generally, and our partners look at it from a cost standpoint. If it's the difference of $20,000, we're gonna kick the garage and not include it. There are other concepts that we've worked with. We will potentially use with some of these smaller modular home projects, and actually stole it from a multifamily project in Spearfish. So instead of doing a full garage there, they have carports, and they've actually, the way they built the carport is they use solar panels as the roof of the carport, and that then turns around and generates the energy necessary for the housing unit. And so it's actually a way to provide some covered parking, and then reduce costs for the person living in the unit. You know, with a lot of times for us, with the increase in land values and what that costs, the garage is unfortunately the casualty of one of the things that just doesn't get included. You know, and most people, I would say, that we talk to, you know, will you buy this without a garage? You know, if I can buy a home, I will take it without the garage if that's my choice.
Other questions?
First, let me thank all of you for saying the things that those of us that work in Watertown can't say sometimes as economic and development professionals. Glad that we're talking about cost. My question is, in the markets you work in, have you seen an ability to reduce or eliminate or extend the return on the infrastructure cost at the back end of the deal, as opposed to baking it in on the front end? And I'm talking about grading, drainage, water, sewer, other infrastructures that may have what I call a meter at the site and can earn revenue downstream in the life of the project, as opposed to putting that burden on the developer on the front end. So if you could address what you've seen West River or anywhere else in the state in that regard.
Great question. I actually had the apparently now infamous ability to have bought the flattest piece of empty property in Rapid City, South Dakota. Closed on that last month. We do a massive amount of research up front on our projects and where they're going to get located to try to do infill and on flat parcels if at all possible, especially with, you know, we do work in Lee, Deadwood, Custer. You know, you're not even talking about just grading there. A lot of times you're having to dynamite or drill through rock to get that infrastructure into place. A lot of times we'll work with the cities too to try to understand what their comp plans look like and understand where they're going with that. And if we can find a way to piggyback on where they're already gonna spend their dollars, that is a way that we've found to not put that on the developer. If the city is already planning 2 years from now to extend the water sewer road down this direction for another mile, to us that's an optimal location to try to put a project. Again, you know, we, not also the developer, but also the communities we work in and serve. You know, if we're just doing continual sprawl, developers have to pay a lot up front. The city also long-term is gonna have to pay for that infrastructure for upkeep and repair. Like you said, at a certain point, that stuff just wears out. So we, you know, a lot of developers and communities we work with, okay, what's the best cost-effective structure we can do for the infrastructure, and can we all work together and do it in the same place at the same time?
For us, it was fairly simple. The dirt balanced. So the crawl space dirt was used to build it up, and then the black dirt was sufficient for after we were done. Water and sewer was in 2 spots because it was 2 lots, so they were already there, and so it was just part of the lot purchase. We did apply for the funds through Amy, and we got denied. We didn't qualify.
I can't speak to the full effect on what we're doing on the construction side since I'm not entirely familiar with it, but I do know the process of picking parcels of land. That's really where we're doing more of our due diligence versus since we are copy-paste, have our model down. We're a little bit pickier on that part to make sure, again, simplicity for us. We don't want to go to a piece of land that's going to need a ton of dirt moved or anything like that.
Okay. Other questions that anyone would have?
Again, I don't have too much to say on that. What I'll say on our end is we think people deserve beautiful, dignified places to live. And so we take pride in our architecture to make sure it is a modern, good-looking building. Not to say that any of those can't be or anything. I think it's just something that you have to be intentional with.
I think there possibly could be a future for it. We're looking at it. But transportation is so expensive too that it has to be somewhere in South Dakota, I would say. Part of the Dakotaplex cost is bringing it to your site, and they will bring it to your site as part of the price no matter where you are in South Dakota. So that's very affordable on that side of things. So I think there could be a future for it, Lori.
Kind of, this is a little bit cheating, but Lori and I were talking at the last break about why we're pursuing manufactured homes. And I would guess that it's probably not different in a lot of your communities. We have a very limited number of builders in the Black Hills. And those builders with their business interests, and I have no right to judge anybody on the decisions they make when they're doing that, can build a $3 to $5 million log cabin home outside of Lead, or they can buy and build affordable house. It's pretty easy to see what most of those are going to make as a decision for themselves and their business. So we actively are pursuing modular home builders because we have a problem finding people to hire to build homes. Stick built, site built, all great. We want to intersperse modulars in communities with those housing types as well. Townhomes, all of those kinds of things. We have gone so far as to work with some modular builders with plants in Minnesota, Nebraska, and Colorado. They have given us their cost per mile to transport a home from their factory, and we map it out to every community that we serve in the Black Hills. So we're getting those transportation costs pretty dialed in and understood. It's one of those things where I wish it was just local folks that we could hire to build homes in our local communities, but we don't have that opportunity. So modular is certainly something we're looking at extensively. Lori also mentioned, and was also brought up, zoning. Some people think that zoning ordinances are only negative. I would dispute that. There is a time and a place to have the correct zoning and building ordinances put into place to protect your communities from negative impacts. We have a situation going on right now in Meade County and Piedmont, which is part of our coverage area, where a gravel mine company bought a significant chunk of property inside the city and was going to open a gravel mine. And they can legally do it because there is no zoning codes in Meade County. We have the same conversation on the other end and say, listen, your community may think these are subpar products. Maybe they have a visual in their heads of mobile home parks. That is not at all what those products look like anymore. And one of the things we found a lot of traction with is taking the decision makers. We have a lot of partners that have Governor's Homes projects in the Black Hills. We'll take them on site, take them through the home, show them what the quality of the unit is. Can do very similar things. Eisman Homes out in the Black Hills will also allow us to do that. And so we can really show those decision makers, today your ordinance says you cannot have a modular home at all in city limits, and we think that is incredibly short-sighted. So again, do you want affordable housing in your community, or is it just lip service? Great point, Lori. It is something that I think if we don't start looking at and providing as an option, we're going to create more issues for ourselves.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate the questions and the panel's work. Let's respond to them for their presentation here today. So we're going to transition over to the next steps here. So Angie's going to give the instructions, and appreciate again your attendance here today.
Perfect. We're going to take a break here. Lunch will be served at 11:45.
Who is Jacob Clark, a Watertown High School graduate who has built an impressive career spanning research, nonprofits, philanthropy, and impact investing. At JP Morgan Chase, Jacob has been instrumental in designing major initiatives, including the bank's $30 billion racial equity, I knew I'd mess up some word, commitment, and several $100 million efforts focused on the future of work, small business growth, and financial affordable housing. As head of impact for Impact Finance and Advisory, Jacob integrates JPMC's grant making with investment strategies across debt, venture, and fund structures to help create a more inclusive and sustainable economy. Please join me in welcoming Jacob Clark, who's going to present the Opportunity Equation, Data, Decisions, and Community Impact.
Thanks, Julie. And thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I am acutely aware that competing with lunch is an unenviable position, so please keep munching on your chips, open up your cans of soda, and I will try my hardest not to get distracted. And also just want to start with how much of a treat it is to be here, both on the fact that we are having this borderline tropical February day in South Dakota. It's a whopping 20 degrees warmer here than in New York. And also for the opportunity to have a conversation about Watertown and its future. I haven't had the opportunity to do that in a long time, and it's something that I'm really excited to do, especially in front of a room full of experts and community leaders that, quite frankly, could be on the stage themselves. So as Julie said, I am a proud son of Watertown, South Dakota. I was born in Prairie Lakes Hospital. I attended Garfield and Jefferson elementary schools. I competed in tennis and basketball and football and eventually debate during the school years. And I spent my summers playing junior Olympic softball on Cook Complex. And in 2011, I graduated from Watertown High School. After WHS, I went to pursue college and my university degree on the East Coast at Tufts University outside of Boston. And despite having literally never stepped foot out of the country, I decided to study international relations, which was really a study in how different economies develop and the way in which our political systems and economic systems shape the places in which we live. And after graduating from Tufts, I then had a series of different jobs focusing on economic and workforce development. I had roles in the federal government, like Senator Tim Johnson's office and the U.S. Agency for International Development. I worked for research and think tank organizations like Common Sense Action and the Bipartisan Policy Center. And then I worked with national nonprofits like Jobs for the Future and the National Fund for Workforce Solutions, which worked directly with cities in helping them redesign and improve their education and workforce development programs. All of those roles eventually led me to JP Morgan Chase's corporate responsibility team. I've been there for almost 8 years and have had a number of different roles, spanning philanthropy to impact investing. I started my time at JP Morgan being a grant maker in their corporate foundation focused on economic workforce development and small business development, and deploying hundreds of millions of dollars to ensure that workers had the supports and tools that they needed to succeed in our rapidly changing labor market, and that small businesses had access to the capital that was essential for them to grow and thrive in their communities. After those experiences, I transitioned to a team that was focused on how we develop place-based economic development and worked on initiatives in places as different as Indianapolis to India, and how different types of organizations and different types of capital need to be brought to bear to build a more inclusive economy. And then that led to my current role, which is head of impact for JP Morgan's Impact Finance team, where we invest hundreds of millions of dollars off of JP Morgan's balance sheet, our own corporate assets, into debt and equity investments that promote a more inclusive future. And throughout my entire career and all of the experiences that I've had, there's been one central question that I always come back to, which is, why does it seem that only some people get to succeed? And in trying to answer that question, I've sort of dug into a range of different theories, ranging from our success is entirely a determinant of our choices and our capabilities, and our success is a determinant of the systems in which we live in. So to kind of frame up this fundamental tension, I have a question for the group, and I want people to vote. So if I only had one data point, what is the largest predictive indicator of a student's long-term educational success? So put simply, if we only could know one thing about a student to predict how they would perform in elementary school and high school, would it be their IQ, which is their sort of God-given cognitive capacity, or their parents' income? So I want people to vote. Who thinks is the biggest predictor of economic success, a student's IQ? You can raise your hands. Okay. All right. Who thinks that it's their parents' income? Okay. I didn't anticipate that level of disparity in the vote, but clearly there's a lot of systemic thinkers here, because the unfortunate reality is that it's their parents' income. Another way to think about it is that a student's IQ is like the engine of a car, and your parents' income is like a garage door. It frankly doesn't matter what you have under the hood of the car if you never get the opportunity to drive it into the street. So, as clearly many of us know, economic development and the success in our economies and societies is not simply a determinant of our personal capacity and choices. That we live in a system that structures the opportunity that is available to us. And one way I like to think about it is this really simple comparison to a child's game of chutes and ladders. That there are ladders that'll take you up to the top, there are chutes that will bring you down to the bottom, and you don't really know where you're gonna end up until you start playing the game. So if we think about this chutes and ladders game as a visual representation of our economic distribution, with the lowest income earners in the households with the lowest wealth at the bottom, and the households with the highest wealth at the top. If we lived in a perfectly equal society, if 5 people started in the same place, they should statistically be distributed at the end of the game equally across the board. 1 person in each of the 5 quintiles. Now, the reality of our economy is that opportunity is not equally distributed, and that these chutes and ladders do not lead to all parts of the game. So, looking at if you start at the bottom of the chutes and ladders board, where do you end up? So 9 people out of the 20 will never leave the very bottom quintile of their economic income. And 70% of those people will never cross over the halfway mark. And importantly, only 4%, or 1 box out of that 20, will make it to the top. Simply put, there are not many ladders that go all the way from the bottom to the middle, and virtually no ladders that go from the bottom to the top. Now, let's look at it from the opposite direction. What happens when you start at the top? Well, when you start at the top, you have a 40% chance of staying at the top, and only an 8% chance of falling all the way to the bottom. So what's happening here is that in this game of chutes and ladders that all of us are on, there is in fact 2 locks that are preventing people from moving freely across the board. There's a lock at the very bottom, which is the poverty persistence lock, which means that there are very few people who are breaking out of the lowest points of our economy. And there's a wealth preservation lock, where very few people are actually dropping down to more equal distributions within this board. Now, quite frankly, it's really hard to break those locks, particularly at the top. Wealth continues to perpetuate its own privilege. So I think the more constructive conversation for us to be having here is how do we build more ladders, and how do we make sure that those ladders reach as low to the bottom of the board as possible? I like to think about this as our zone of opportunity, and the conversation I want us to have today is about what ladders go to different parts of this board, and how high do they go up. So, economic development is not some amorphous concept that happens to us. It's in fact a series of interlocking systems and institutions that convey opportunity and privilege or withhold it. And these things can be dissected, researched, and ultimately graded. So I want to walk us through what Watertown's economic development grade is. So we have a B, which I think is a pretty solid place to start. In fact, we were actually outperforming South Dakota on 4 of the 5 dimensions. And have a lot of things that we should be proud of. Now, diving into each of these kind of dimensions of economic development, I want to walk through some indicators that are pointers that we are doing things well, and then also areas where we might see opportunity for improvement. So on an economic performance standpoint, the first piece I want to start with is our unemployment rate. I'd also note that this data is from 2023, so it's a little bit outdated, but it shows what we have known in our community for a long time, which is that we have below the national average of unemployment rates. The other two things I wanted to point out here, which are really encouraging, is that we have a lower rate of poverty and a lower distribution of economic inequality, which means that our community is more equal than many other parts of the country. One area of potential concern is the fact that our median household income is below not only the national average, but the South Dakota average, which is an indicator that there may be fewer higher quality, higher paying jobs in our community, which might be preventing our long-term economic success. Now, the next dimension is our educational outcomes. And the thing I want to point out here that we should be exceptionally proud of is this 90% graduation rate. This is significantly higher than the South Dakota average and the national average, and I think it's a real testament to the quality of Watertown High School and the educators that work there. However, we see that after high school, many people aren't going to pursue an associate's degree or higher, again indicating that we may not be investing in our economic success at the top end of our economy, and that we may sort of continue to live in the legacy as a blue-collar town with fewer knowledge work opportunities. From a community engagement standpoint, there are two indicators that I really want to point out that Watertown should be proud of. These indicators are often called disadvantaged or opportunity youth, and it's students and young people that are not working and are not attached to the labor market, and it's a leading indicator of communities' long-term health. Because if communities aren't able to successfully engage young people and get them invested in their future and in their community, it is likely that they'll sort of fall out of the process and end up causing sort of more harm than aid to the community overall. That being said, we can see that that kind of indicator shows up in another really important development of community health, which is this deaths related to alcohol, drug abuse, and suicide. This is often called deaths of despair and is a really tragic indicator of what percentage of your population is disconnected and isolated and unsupported to the extent that they're engaging in incredibly harmful behavior to both themselves and the community overall. Now, kind of taking a step back, I want to talk about, out of all of those indicators, what is really going well and what story is it telling for Watertown. So, again, the 2% unemployment rate indicates that Watertown has extremely high levels of job creation and the opportunity for workers to quickly and hopefully easily deploy to different opportunities. Furthermore, not only do we have a lower than national average unemployment rate, but we have a higher than national average workforce participation rate at 65%. That's almost 5 percentage points higher than the national average, which means that a greater percentage of our working age population are actively engaged in the labor market. The other things that we should be really proud of as a community is the quality of our educational institutions. We have standout elementary schools and have made significant investments in things like the middle school and have consistent and high rates of teacher and student engagement, which show that we have a system that's really working. For our higher education, Watertown High School ranks in the top third of high schools in South Dakota. And then, of course, Lake Area Technical Institute is one of the leading community colleges, not only in South Dakota, but actually in the nation. In fact, I had the opportunity to work with a team that researches and administers this Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence, which I think President Barack Obama called the Oscars for community colleges. And when I told them that I was from Watertown, South Dakota, they were so excited to tell me about their experience being here and how they flew into ATY on a frigid February day, and they were greeted with a whole host of LATI administrators and educators who had coats and mittens, and that they drove them to Lake Area. And these people were blown away, not just by the facilities and the faculty of Lake Area, by one very important indicator of a community college success, which is the engagement of its area employers, and about how Watertown and our region's major employers were actively working with Lake Area to communicate the jobs that were in demand in our community articulate the skills that were necessary to succeed in those jobs, and then to ensure that Lake Area had the equipment, expertise, and financing to adequately teach those students those skills and succeed in the jobs that were in demand in our community. Now, not everything can be a good story, and there are things that Watertown needs to work on. So the first is the flip side of this 2% unemployment rate, which is that it is far too low. The actual kind of natural unemployment rate in a healthy economy is closer to 4 to 5%, and that means that there's enough slack in the labor market that a community can attract new employers that are willing to relocate there and have confidence that they'll be able to build a necessary workforce, and that your legacy employers have the capacity to grow organically in the community in which you are without having to leave for another region. This will be a persistent theme in Watertown's economic development and something we really need to grapple with. Now, there's potentially multiple indicators, which is these next three things, of why Watertown is struggling to attract the workforce that it needs. The first that has been sort of persistently shown is the lack of consistent and affordable childcare and our over-reliance as a community on unlicensed daycare systems. This is likely preventing young parents with young families from locating here and really investing in the early stages of their career here as they're balancing the burden of raising a family and also pursuing a career. The other piece that I alluded to is that we have lower rates of higher education attainment, which is also then likely creating a feedback loop where there's lower rates of knowledge and service sector work in our community, which is potentially depriving Watertown from traditionally higher quality, higher paying jobs that benefit both the people who have them, but also Watertown's tax base. And then lastly, which is the thing that we're obviously all focused on here today, is the persistent shortage of housing. As we're going to hear later today, it's projected that Watertown needs around 3,000 additional units of housing over the next 10 years, and that 50% of those housing units need to be affordable. So throughout my experiences, personally and professionally, I've learned that communities succeed by investing in themselves. So the question we're asking ourselves today is, how exactly can Watertown do that? And I want to present a couple of different sort of tools and methods for us to do that, many of them that we've heard about today. Now, the first is, what can our city government do? What are the policies and zoning procedures that encourage more development in our community? There are a range of different successful methods I've seen in communities like Watertown. One is community land trusts or land banks, where blighted or undeveloped property is sold into the city in order for it to be easily resold to developers for future development. The use of tax abatements that allow projects to pencil, particularly in the short term, that then allow development to happen now as opposed to later. As well as the ability for the cities to make direct investments, particularly equity investments in communities that have well-articulated and clear community benefits, as well as the ability to sort of alter and create more developer-friendly zoning and higher density zoning laws. Now, we obviously heard today from Michael and Lori a whole range of federal financing programs that communities can leverage to get key pieces of capital into the projects that they are trying to develop and pursue. Furthermore, there's a whole plethora of tech-enabled tools that cities are increasingly turning to mine the data that they have about their community, engage with their community more dynamically and fluidly to understand what it is that they need, and then ultimately to deploy services in a more efficient and cost-effective way. And then the last bucket of tools, which is the area that I've spent the last 8 years at in JP Morgan, is how do you get private dollars into projects that have public benefit? And here is a couple of different institutions whose a part of their mandate is doing this type of work. So CRA-oriented banks, which is all banks, are governed by the Community Reinvestment Act, which requires them to make community development investments and are often then providing capital in sort of catalytic ways that can be leveraged. One of those ways is that the financing often flows from the CRA originating bank to these organizations called Community Development Financial Institutions, which are organizations that are sanctioned by the Department of Treasury to on-lend to the most underserved and undercapitalized borrowers and communities in our country. There are thousands of CDFIs around the country. There are dozens of CDFIs in South Dakota, including Grove, South Dakota, and they are often really important development partners for communities to turn to. And then lastly, there are a whole range of private equity, real estate investment funds, and opportunity zone funds, which collect limited partner equity investments from investors globally and nationally, and then invest those in various projects at the community level. Now, I wanted to sort of pull from these tools, and particularly pull from a recent experience that I had at JP Chase, which is that we bundled together $40 million worth of grants and $5 billion worth of debt and equity investments focused exclusively on preserving and promoting the development of affordable housing. And sort of from these hundreds of different partnerships that we were working on around the country, I've selected a couple of methods and approaches that I think might be interesting for us to think about. The first is a CDFI called Housing Assistance Council. They are a national CDFI that operates in 36 states with a focus on rural communities. And what they do is that they provide catalytic missing financing that is often needed to get a project off the ground and into its life cycle. So we can see an example here of kind of multiple pieces of those community development tools coming together. So there was this example of adaptive reuse in Tupelo, Mississippi. As you can see here, there was this blighted carnation milk factory in the community that was an eyesore and wasn't providing sort of any jobs or any benefits to the community. And what the sort of organizers in Tupelo were able to do was to purchase that property from the community land bank using a pre-development financing loan from Housing Assistance Council, which then allowed them to get the commercial lending necessary to get some of the necessary permitting and early development, which then allowed them to access LIHTC financing from the federal government, which preserved long-term affordability of 50 units of long-term living in their community. So this is the type of example of how kind of policies come together to really transform a property and being a sort of net liability to a community to a net asset. And I think a version of this that we've seen in Watertown is the Harmony Hill project of leveraging community assets for sort of new purposes. Now, this is an example of senior living and multifamily housing, but we live in a community that is really focused on single-family homes. And that's why I wanted to point out another example, which is Habitat Mortgage Solutions. Now, Habitat Mortgage Solutions works with an organization that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Habitat International, which works with volunteers and community organizations to build single-family homes for low-income families. Now, the kind of missing part of that story is once you build the home, the family needs to purchase it. And oftentimes, the family who's the recipient of that home isn't eligible for a traditional mortgage, which is where Habitat Humanity comes into the picture. They are able to provide high LTV, so loan-to-value ratio loans with low down payments and a lower blended cost of capital to borrowers who would not be able to access a mortgage. And by offering that to the borrowers, they can then purchase the home, and Habitat International then has the capital to redevelop and sort of move on to the next project. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about a really unique organization that I think is building ladders to the very bottom part of that Chutes and Ladders board. And that is thinking about how you promote alternative forms of ownership for some of the lowest income communities that are families that are in our community. So Rock USA is a really interesting organization that operates nationally and exclusively works with resident manufactured home communities or mobile home parks. So what they do is when a mobile home park is going up for sale, they go in as quickly as possible and start engaging with and organizing the residents to eventually purchase the community for themselves. Rock then provides the debt financing that allows them to amortize the payments over several years and then transitions the control of the community to the owners of that community. As I'm sure many of you know, the notion of a mobile home is quite a misnomer, and the fact that sort of once you put your mobile home somewhere, you're not going to move it again, and you're then subject to lot rent prices that can change over time. And what Rock USA does is that by transitioning the ownership from some type of external person or an external equity and private equity firm into the community, they result in sort of lower increases in lot rents, which allow people to have more stable, long-term kind of budgeting. And it also creates a sort of wealth bump when they sell that mobile home in the future, because people see the benefit of living in a resident-owned community. Now, as I said before, communities grow and benefit by investing in themselves, and Watertown is investing in itself. It has multiple examples of big, bold, ambitious projects that we're doing, ranging from Harmony Hills to the middle school, to the health and wellness arena, to the hockey arena, to Lake Area Tech. And not only are we investing in roads and buildings and infrastructure, but we're investing in our people. And I know that because Watertown invested in me. I am very much a product of this educational system, of this community, and I am undoubtedly where I am today because this community invested in me. Now, I've known that I was a product of this community for a long time, and not only that, I've been really proud to be a celebrated member of this community. The picture here is me when I was 18 years old receiving the Davis Award, which was given to one graduating senior every year, and is sort of one of the highest honors that you can get as a graduating senior. And in this moment, there's a lot going on in my head. I am incredibly honored and proud to be the person that got to be pulled up on the stage. But there's something else going on. I, in that moment, and for many years later, kept going back to the same question, which is, do I actually belong here? Now, I couldn't have told anyone at the time. I couldn't have even really told myself. But I was gay, and I knew from an early age that something about me was different than most people here. And because I was different, I never really knew if I belonged here, if I had a future here. And for a long time, I thought that that was maybe just my personal experience. Until actually I was preparing for this speech. And I was reading Watertown Strategic Plan, H2 of 50, and I was absolutely struck by this statistic, which is that only 50% of survey respondents are likely or very likely to recommend Watertown to a friend, colleague, or family member as a good place to live. Now, that percentage is probably lower because the people who are least likely to endorse Watertown are also probably the least likely to fill out a survey. And I think this is the last piece of Watertown's economic development scorecard that we need to talk about. We have a B on a lot of the hard stuff. The economic indicators, the policy environment, the collaboration among our key institutions, and yet we have an F on what I think is this incredibly important dimension of belonging. Do people actually want to live here? And importantly, in a community that wants to grow, do they want to endorse this as a place to live for other people? And I want us to sort of dig into that question of who belongs here and who is in our community. Now, as you can see here, Watertown is predominantly male and disproportionately white. And I know there are people in our community that will look at me and say, Jacob, that is not a bug, that is a feature. We are a successful community because we are a homogenous community. And while that might be true in the way in which we've been able to preserve our traditions and our culture, I want you to all grapple with what is the cost of that homogeny? If I, as the blue-eyed, blonde-haired boy of this town, felt like I didn't belong, who else feels like they don't belong? Not only the non-native English speaker or the single mom, but are we driving away the white nuclear family from Brookings who just feels like they don't really get it here? And unfortunately, the Watertown survey doesn't say why only 50% of people would endorse this place. And in fact, I think answering that question is going to be really hard, and there's a lot of softness to it. But I want, in closing, for us to think about how do we make residents feel invested in and want to invest in this community. And I have so much faith And not only this community overall, but the people in this room, because the fact that you've spent your entire day here and the fact that you are literal builders of this community means that you care and that you are invested in this community. But there is simply no way that Watertown is going to grow or even stay relevant if we are not able to grow our community overall and we're not able to expand our definitions of ourselves. So, in closing, I want to ask you all to think not only about the capital stacks and the grant applications and the permitting and the financing and everything else that requires to do the work that we're talking about today, but I want to ask yourself, what does it mean to be an ambassador of belonging in Watertown? And how do you go out into your life, into your churches, into your children's schools, into your neighborhood, and make people feel, whether they've lived there their entire lives or they're here their first day, like Watertown is a place that they belong in, a place that will invest in them, and a place that they should invest in. Thank you.
We've got a few minutes for questions for Jacob here. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, over
Do
here.
you still live here, Jacob?
No, I live in New York.
Okay, and how often do you come back to the Watertown community?
Like 6 to 8 times a year. My parents still live here. They're sitting right there. My dad had a long career at Persona. My mom is a realtor in town. And I've always kind of felt this tension between this being a place like I could call home and also a place that I felt like I needed to leave.
And how many years have you been gone?
Since I graduated high school, so almost 15 years.
And what's the biggest change you've noticed, good or bad? Maybe both sides.
That's a thoughtful question. I really am impressed by the sort of ambition of Watertown's development. I mean, and you see it in the community, right? The things I pointed to, like, you really are building big things and putting Watertown on the map, and I think, quite frankly, punching above your weight. I think on the bad side is this belonging question. I had a conversation I was kind of talking through with my parents and members of my sort of close community and friends about what I wanted to talk about. And I was struck by the fact that there are people who've lived here for decades, 50 years, who still feel like they're not from Watertown and that people look at them differently. And I knew I had the opportunity to talk about kind of all of the hard economic development things, but I really wanted to talk about this other dimension because I think it is one of the biggest things that is preventing this community from succeeding. Thank you for the question.
Do we have any other questions here?
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you, Jacob.
We're going to get ready for the next session and we're going to be shifting over to some of the work we're doing right here in the community. Before do that, in terms of like Greg and Jacob, in terms of finding partners and people to bring fruition to projects and resources and connections, I just want you to know how I got connected with Jacob. So I use LinkedIn as a tool, have for years for that. I'm not good at Instagram and Facebook or any of that kind of stuff. But LinkedIn, you can put in a search tool, and I put in Watertown High School graduate. And Jacob's name popped up. And I looked at his background, affordable housing, workforce housing, all the things that we had been talking about in our housing groups. And then, of course, I look at his resume and I look, this is really an impressive connection for what we're trying to accomplish. And so when I went to LinkedIn, I looked at that tool. It's the same way I found Greg Litton, is going there and reaching out and having a connection. So there was a few people that I knew that knew Jacob. So I texted do you know this guy? Because somebody, you're not connected on LinkedIn, you don't know that person, right? And they said, oh yeah, I know Jacob, and I know his mom, and the realtor, da-da-da. So that person connected Direct. Direct got me, talked to Jacob. Direct texted me Jacob's phone number. And then I talked to Jacob, borrowed the phone, and I said, by the way, I'm headed to New York City for another business meeting. Would you mind, we could just grab lunch and we'll talk about this session and what we're trying to accomplish. And he actually attended a business meeting that was related to the United Nations kind of work that I'm involved in a different facet in my life. And some other charitable work for kind of what we're trying to do with Challenger Center. And so those connections brought me to having what Jacob can bring in terms of resources here and his knowledge. It's the same thing with Greg Litton, is going out, connecting, messaging him, having a conversation, and then bringing in partners. And for a lot of these projects, you have to have the right people to surround you and make that happen. And I just want to encourage, there's lots of ways to go out and find the right people to help you and your project and the work in this community. And so we're very grateful for our speakers today that would come here today. And so again, thank you for your participation. So we're now going to transition over to the panels, and Andy, are you going to lead that on? Or all right, you're going to lead it on. Very good.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa, and I have the privilege of introducing Alan Stager, our city manager, who will be facilitating presentations from our housing partner groups. Each organization will share their goals and priorities for the coming year. But first, for those who do not know Alan, he brings decades of executive leadership experience, most recently serving as general manager of Dakota Bodies. Dakota Bodies is a Watertown-based manufacturer of specialized truck bodies. Previously, Alan spent 19 years at Terex Corporation. He worked in senior leadership roles across finance, strategic planning, IT, supply chain, and business development, helping expand the company globally while considering consolidating key operations in Watertown. A certified public accountant, he moved to Watertown in 2002 and has remained deeply engaged in the community, serving as vice chairman of the Watertown Development Company and participating in the H2O 20 Strategically Implementation Committee. Excuse me. Please help me and everyone to welcome Alan as our presenting partner.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you to the WDC team for pulling this together. Before I introduce the 5 leaders of our initiatives, I just want to take the opportunity to also thank Jacob and to do something that I always try to do when I find somebody could be a boomerang person back into the community or someone who could relocate here, and let you know you're welcome in our community and you have a job you can do from anywhere. So we'd love to have you back. So the next group that will be coming up one at a time, it's a group that when I first stepped into this role late last summer, I found out we had a group of housing people meeting about every week in City Hall, and really passionate about trying to drive some change, but we're getting a little stuck with where to go next. And so we started to pull that group together, and we focused in on 5 core initiatives that we believe can drive the creation of 3,000 more housing units by 2035. Those 3,000 housing units will help us facilitate the growth to 30,000 people in the community in 2035. Some of you may have attended our housing summit that we held back in October of last year. It was at that summit that we gave all of the key stakeholders a first look at what we were thinking. And again, this is just an informal group of people from a variety of organizations coming together and trying to put some structure around what to do next in housing. So with that, I'll actually bring up Cam Corey from Lake Area Technical College. Cam is going to walk through the initiatives that we have around creating student housing in the community. Welcome, Cam.
All right, good afternoon, and I also want to thank the Watertown Development Company for having us. And this is a very important conversation for us today. I would like to also first start out and thank Jacob for his comments here today. I am one that am not from Watertown, but I've lived here for over 20 years. I've had multiple opportunities to leave Watertown for career advancements. And I've chosen to stay here for the simple reason I raised my kids here that received the same investment that Jacob did. And I will say I'm very proud of you and where you've come, and what, like Alan said, you're welcome back at Lake Area Tech. I probably can't compare with JP Morgan's wages, but very good. So for Lake Area Tech, we are doing very, very well, and Jacob talked about it. We receiving the Oscars, as Barack Obama said, and we are very often called the Harvard of technical colleges. We have technical colleges that come to Lake Area Tech to learn from us, and so we are sitting in a very, very good spot. We have 2,758 students right now, and that is a high water mark. We have aligned ourselves with the city's strategic plan of 2035. We believe Lake Area Tech is a big part of growth of the city, and we have had just some excellent conversations with Alan and Brandy and Justin in the last 3 years, and really since they've come on board, we have seen a lot of advancement in the communication. And I do think that Lake Area Tech and the city has a big role to play together in advancing the city of Watertown. So as we look at Lake Area Tech, we have, and Jacob talked about it, engagement with our industry. Industry is telling us we need more of a workforce. And we are expected or need to grow approximately 44% in the next 10 years. And so we're at 2,758 right now, and we grow up to, that's close to 4,000 students. So how do we do that? And we know that there's a housing issue, student housing issue that is in Watertown. I would say that some of that student housing has softened a little bit, and locally our developers and housing have done a good job, and it's really coming to the affordability and what students want. For our students in particular, our students are telling us that affordability is $550 to $600 a month, and that is really for a bedroom for them. If it's a 3-bedroom, obviously that would increase that. But the challenges with that is they're signing leases. Not all residents, not all students get along, and then they become stuck. And so there's some challenges through that model that's there. But Watertown has grew by about that 40%, or Lake Area Tech has grown by that 40% in the last 10 years. From 2014 to 2023, Lake Area Tech grew 1,000 students. So it's been done before, it's been absorbed by the community, and I believe that we can do it again. So we have to work in, we know some of our students are taking up beds, right, from maybe other areas of a segment of workforce. And so we are in conversations with private developers as far as what our students need to be able to accommodate that growth. Interestingly enough, and this is an overlap, of our students, 31% of the graduates stay in Cottington County. So when we think about growth and we're bringing students in, 31% of them are staying right here for jobs. I think that's a statistic that I think bodes well for the community of Watertown. It helps in that goal of 30,000 people. But in order to do that, we have to find that affordable housing. Our students come out 6 months after graduation making an average of $56,000 is what their annual salary is. They're paying back their tuition in 5 months or under that. But think about them staying in the community and how that can be affordable. So our plan is we are working with private developers. I will comment on one thing. I've received some calls from maybe some property management companies saying, hey, we have availability that's here, or questions that have come up and says, hey, we hear that Lake Area Tech is just giving land to private developers. And so I want to just address that really quickly, and that we are not giving land to private developers. We are in conversations with many different private developers in what would best suit those needs. In selling land, we saw one of the slides came up earlier. Is there unused school property that could be used for housing? And so those are conversations that we're having. We're open to leasing and any type of those conversations. So for us, things are going really well at Lake Area Tech. That is where we're looking to go and what the expectation is of industry for our students to grow.
Thank you, Cam. Up next, we have our single-family workforce presentation. And before I do that, I just want to call your attention to the format. We didn't talk about that before, but each one of these you'll see up on the upper right side of the slide, it has a number of units. That's the number of units we anticipate the initiative will be delivered between now and 2035. So up to present single-family workforce housing is Bill Riefenberger. Many of you know Bill. He's been involved in the building and development community in Watertown for decades and is truly an expert in home building and an expert in developing property developments. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thank you. I got paper too. I'm not looking on my phone, so it's part of that age group, obviously. As you can see on this slide here, that I've kind of been given the task to figure out a way to get 1,200 new homes by 2035. As first thing that came to mind with me was, okay, so where does it lie in proportion to what we've been doing? And so I got some numbers from the city, and we've in the last 4 years we've gone from somewhere between the low of 62 and the high of 81 homes. So if we average that out, we've got to increase by about 55% annually. I suspect our plan will come together with where it has to grow faster down the line. So at some point in time, we're probably going to have to be doing double what we currently are doing plus. I do believe that's all doable. So my first duties with this is to get an outline of how I wanted to approach this. And the first thing I went to was between Watertown and the surrounding. So we looked a little bit at what the surrounding communities have, which is very little as far as properties that are already developed. And then we've got within Watertown, what do we have? And so there's a little more than this out there, but 11 different developments that are either master planned, part of them underway or whatever. In the green are what's currently available, and the yellow is what's kind of been master planned, which has got latitude to manipulate that around. It could change from whatever zoning. But currently, from what I've got, we've got around 320 lots that are buildable right now. That to me means a couple of years. So we've got to be looking forward with the developers and working with them. When I say developers, to me, developer is a land developer. A lot of people think of a developer as a builder, but to me, that's a contractor. So, second phase of that would be we look forward enough to know what is available, and we know that these people are going to be continuing to put together the next phases of as developments get done. They're brought in smaller phases based on you can't put all that investment into too big of an area at one time. The cost will just interest cost and taxes, everything else, are going to make it not profitable at all to do. So they have to pace that. So we need to come up with a plan that everybody understands what the goal is, and that they can pace to keep up with what we need to do. Step back here on. So that was part of that review the master plans that are available. And I got the numbers on what was done in the last few years. So the biggest hurdles that I see is not so much the development of the lots, which I think we can get to that, but we've got to educate the contractors, get more of them involved. We're not building a lot of spec houses in town. And as somebody alluded to from Rapid or whatever, that the builders are going to build what they're asked to build. And obviously, if they've got something that's pre-sold, it's more difficult for them to look at. Well, I don't want to do the risk. We've got to help them alleviate some of that risk if they're going to do some specs. And obviously, if the specs to me currently are going to be more likely in the range of more what we've been doing out to Prairie Haven, something that the affordable word to me is frustrating. I don't like to use it because affordable means everything, something different to every one of you. But something that we can get more of the workforce environment into, and like, I guess I want to allude a little bit, because I just heard that from Jacob, was his chutes and ladders. And I think that a big ladder that we can help with people is in owning a home. Because I honestly believe that the best thing that a young family or young people can do is in owning a home, is they build that equity, and that's the quickest way to build some wealth, is through their home. And so what we've been doing at Prairie Haven, that's been kind of our main goal, is that housing would be, or those homes that we build out there would be starter homes. Some of them might be permanent forever, but get them into a smaller home that they best could afford. When we started that project out there, it was intended to be like around the $250,000. Interest rates were at 3%. Mortgage, including taxes, was going to be around $1,100. Well, COVID came. Now we're looking at most of the houses are slightly over 3, but the interest rates are double, and so we're looking at more like a $2,200 payment. The good thing is when we started that, we didn't know we were going to get into that, and it went bad. Now we're on the downside of that curve, and things are, in my opinion, are getting better every day. And I really think that the goal on this to get 1,200 homes is a doable thing. Like I said, the home ownership is one of the biggest things I think for building wealth, but it also ties people to the community. And that one of the other things that came to mind is Jacob was talking about, I'm surprised to see that 50% of the people wouldn't recommend Watertown. So I know in my process here, one of the main goals is how are we going to market this to get people to come to town? Obviously, we're going to have to start with marketing it to our own people. So why do we want to live in Watertown? What are we going to do for those of us that have kids that have moved away, encourage them to come back? We have what we need to have here. We just got to promote it. I think that's pretty much my notes on it, but the other thing I guess I want to do is I've got some people that was on my list on the committee, but I'm open to any suggestions. There's no dumb ideas. We'll take anybody's ideas. We got some work to do, and anybody that's interested in being part of this committee, get a hold of me, because we're going to need all the help we can get. We're going to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Up next is Michael Klott, who you've heard from before. Michael has taken on the initiative of driving the growth in multifamily properties as part of the housing bridge.
Thanks, Alan. So throughout today, you've seen a lot of different multifamily options. And I think oftentimes we think multifamily and we think large apartment buildings as what multifamily represents. And multifamily has lots of different definitions. A fourplex,